I was just going to wait for him, or do you want to go? All right. Are you ready? I'm ready. Good morning, everybody. It is Monday, February 10th, 2025. This is a workshop meeting of the Commissioners of the City of Rehoboth Beach. We're live in the City Hall Commissioners Room, second floor. I'd like to call this meeting to order at 9:02 a.m. Would you please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We'll start off with a roll call. Commissioner Mark Saunders.
Present.
Commissioner Suzanne Good.
Present.
Commissioner Ed Chernowski. Absent. Commissioner Patrick Gossett.
Here.
Commissioner Bunky Markert. Here. Commissioner Craig Fair.
Here.
And the mayor is here, so while we don't have a full complement, we do have a quorum and are able to formally conduct business today. Thank you all for being here. I'd also like to identify staff that's here. City Secretary Ann Womack's over there. City Manager Taylor Tedder is here. Max Walton will be here in a minute or two. He is our interim city manager. City solicitor. Thank you. Let's see here. With that, we'll go to make mention that I wanted to thank everybody that's watching virtually. Also like to thank everybody that's here in person. There are opportunities to speak during the meeting and at the end of the meeting, both on topic and off topic, and the rules are in the back page of the agenda. There's also support documents embedded in the agenda, noted in the printed out agenda, an electronic version, and including correspondence. When correspondence and support documents are available sufficient time ahead of the meeting, they are also embedded in the agenda. Today we're going to change the sequence. And we're going to do the 2 items of new business first, and then we'll do the 2 items of old business, which puts us in this sequence. Presentation by Beacon Engineering on the Canal dock. Number 2, presentation by ezVOLTz. Number 3, development of the city's fund balance. And number 4, discuss structure of the advisory committees. And this is done so that those making the presentations early can leave here and go back to their other jobs. With that, we'll move on to the mention of correspondence. Again, there's nothing to embed in the agenda because it was received late. However, we do want to acknowledge former Commissioner Lisa Schlosser's letter about the Canal Bank. And with that, we'll go to City Manager's report.
Thank you, Mayor. Good morning, commissioners and members of the public. We're counting down. There are just 2 more days to launch the city's new website. The new site features a complete redesign and fresh modern look, updated content, more responsive mobile view, streamlined navigation, an AI-assisted search function, and accessibility enhancement widget for users with disabilities. We hope that all of our digital visitors, residents, and business owners will find the new site attractive and helpful, and that the information is easily accessible. Please look for the new website beginning Wednesday, February 12th. And by the way, the city's website will have a new domain name beginning Wednesday. The city's website's primary domain will be rehobothbeachde.gov. And don't worry if you forget and type in cityofrehoboth.com, you'll just be redirected to our website. All right, Beach Patrol. Multiple trades continue to work at the new Beach Patrol Public Comfort Station facility on Baltimore Avenue. Most duct work on the first floor has been set into place, and over the next couple of weeks, windows will be set and the ice and water shield will be applied to the roof once the plywood is installed. The sidewalk on the north side of the project will be installed this week, and the south sidewalk closed in preparation for moving of the transformer. We're making good progress on water meter replacements recently approved by the commissioners.
Quick question on Beach Patrol. So 2 questions for you, Mr. Tedder. So the first one is, how are we looking on the schedule? How are we looking on the schedule? Has there been any more slippage on the schedule?
There's no more slippage, and it is on time.
Okay, great. Second is meeting on the 17th when there was a presentation. We were provided with a list of change orders, but it was not the complete list of change orders. It was committed that we would get that complete list of change orders. Can we get that today? Maybe even by noon?
I can send that to you right now.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And picking back up, so we're making good progress on water meter replacements recently approved by the commissioners. On good weather days, about 30 meters a day are being switched out in apartments and condos outside of the city limits behind Big Fish. It's anticipated that the project will be finished in mid-March. Wastewater partnership, so city staff have met with Sussex County leadership twice in the past week regarding the three-way regional wastewater partnership among Sussex County, Lewis Board of Public Works, and the city of Rehoboth Beach. They have updated their financial proposal, which is currently scheduled for the February 21st Board of Commissioners regular meeting to provide an update. And last but not least, the latest forecast sent to Sussex County weather partners this morning via the National Weather Service indicates that our area will have widespread moderate to heavy accumulating snowfall impacting Tuesday evening and or Wednesday morning. Our streets crews are standing by, and our communications team is ready to enhance our communications with residents during this winter weather event. And I'm here for any questions you may have.
Any questions of the commissioners?
Yes, Mayor.
Commissioner
On the
Gossett,
thank
go
you.
ahead.
On the water meter installations, are those remote read meters?
Yes, so all of our new meters have the AMI technology, the advanced metering infrastructure, which that project is moving closer toward residents being able to see their usage in real time on our website.
And that also gives us the ability to read remotely?
Correct, and it also gives a detailed log of usage by hour.
Great. Thank you very much.
Yes.
Commissioner Saunders.
I said, can you give us an update, just generally speaking, where we are with Lewis on the wastewater deal?
Yes, the county has updated their proposal, so they'll be here at your next meeting to go over it.
Great, thank you.
Mayor?
Commissioners, good?
Yeah, I appreciate Commissioner Saunders just raised my question. Sorry, Commissioners, as a add-on to Commissioner Saunders, the way you phrased it, they've upped their offer, sort of. I feel as if this goes back to how we just accepted their initial offer back in, September of 2024. Could you reassure us that this time you're negotiating on behalf? I mean, as you know, I was squarely against this because there just is no way to mitigate the risks of algae bloom and a lot of things. But now that it seems, we're entering into this, assuming approval by the board, how hard are you negotiating on behalf of taxpayers that we get that we get what sort of approximates the value to Lewis of this service of disposing of 5 million gallons a day of treated effluent?
Yeah, Commissioner, we are working as hard as possible to keep the best interest of our taxpayers at heart. So, yes.
I mean, I'm worried only because the tone, I heard was sort of they've upped their offer. Well, their offer shouldn't be driving the narrative this time, in my view, and I hope we'll see a lot of, for instance, the value that people look at have determined from an economic point of view is more than double what they offered us last year. So, and maybe higher than they're willing to pay because the alternatives they have may cost about that same amount of money or even less, and
Sure.
So, I don't know. I'm not reassured by the fact that you're just saying they've upped their offer.
Mayor.
We're in the driver's seat here.
Suzanne,
They have a problem, and we're the least expensive solution for them.
Suzanne, your point is taken. Thank
Mayor,
you
if I could,
thank you
please.
very much.
If I could,
Commissioner
please.
Thayer?
Yeah, thank you. So two things, and I think the first is really just more a statement because I believe there's a lot of misinformation out in the community. The mayor and commissioners didn't approve anything, right? All we did was authorize the city manager to go and try and negotiate with the county. Second, Commissioner Good, I, like you, am very interested in seeing what the negotiations, how the negotiations come back or what they're offering. But again, I'm just going to restate that nothing's been approved. So this deal could fall apart. And I really want to stress that last piece, that this deal could fall apart because there's misinformation in the community that the mayor and commissioners have approved this to go forward when they have not. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move on. No.
Why not questions for the manager?
We don't have questions for the, read,
Questions, Stan. You opened it to the board. You should
read the agenda, Tom.
questions. So the city manager report is not subject to any kind of public review anymore, right?
Tom, we're not doing this.
Stan, so since when did you change the rules? When did you
Let
change
me-
the rules that the public cannot ask questions during the city manager report? So you're gonna stall the public,
Tom, you're out of order.
stall the public from now on,
You
right?
are out.
When did you
of
change the rules?
order.
It's a simple question. When did you
We
change the
changed
rules?
them several months ago. Read the agenda. Tom, I'm not doing this. We're not doing this every time.
Stan, I get it. You're insulated. from
I want to, you're forcing me to address something. The Freedom of Information, Delaware C, Section 10,004 regarding open meetings does give me the authority to remove people from this room. It says, quote, "This section shall not prohibit the removal of any person from a public meeting who is willfully and seriously disruptive of the conduct of such meeting." It doesn't define the term, so I'm defining the terms. Define willfully as deliberately or intentionally or similar. Define seriously disruptive. Seriously is with earnest intent or intense conviction, and disruptive is to prevent something from continuing or operating in a normal way. Examples of being seriously disruptive will include but are not limited to shouting out or interjecting comment without being called on or exceeding the noted time limit or time constraint. Tom and anybody else, we're not putting up with interruptions.
That's understood.
With that, we're moving from city manager's report to interim city solicitor's report.
Yep. I apologize to everyone for being just a moment late today. It was unavoidable. I got here as soon as I could, and otherwise I have no report.
And otherwise, nothing. All righty. With that, as I mentioned earlier, we are going to reverse the order of business today. We're going to do new business A and then new business B. And third step will be old business A, and fourth step, last step, will be old business B. So with that, we'll start off with a presentation by Beacon Engineering and Stable Ground In-Situ related to the Grove Park Canal Access Dock. Do you have anything, or we're just turning it over to him?
I'll turn it over to Henry.
All right, thank you.
Mayor,
Yeah, if you could introduce everybody, go ahead and start. Henry? This is
So,
Henry, our
morning.
Public Works Director.
Morning, all. I have Bob Palmer with me and Fernando from In-Situ Engineering. Just very briefly, at the last budget meeting, it was mentioned that there was settling on the canal dock, and there was money budgeted for repairs next year in it. And had mentioned that at this meeting that Beacon Engineering and would be here to give a presentation. And let me, and Fernando Garcia will be giving the presentation, but I've asked Bob to introduce him.
Thank you, Henry. Good morning, Mayor and Commissioners. For the record, my name is Bob Palmer with Beacon Engineering. A little bit of history about how we got to today. Beacon was called about 9 months or so ago about some observations that were made in the general area where the canal dock is situated. And we stumbled upon the cracks in the wall that I suspect many of you have seen through independent visits. What we have determined is that the other matter that we were evaluating is completely unrelated to this matter. And because of the magnitude of the cracking and perceived settlement that we observed during multiple site visits last spring, we discussed with city staff to prepare an evaluation to understand, is this an active movement or has the canal dock reached its final resting place? Has it settled and is it now static? And so we contacted Fernando Garcia from Stable Underground, and he's here this morning to explain the process of the analysis that was done in order to determine exactly whether or not the canal dock is still moving. We also have 2 surveys that were completed. We completed a baseline survey in August and field located where the walls and the sidewalks were in August. We were back the end of January, and I'm here to report that the area where the cracking has and the settlement has been observed, that part of the dock has moved nearly an inch since August. So at least it appears that it still continues to be active. After the presentation, there's a number of options that we could proceed with. We could do nothing. We could stabilize the slope, which is intended to stop the continued movement of the dock. Beyond stabilization, options are demolition and removal or mitigation of the damage that has occurred to the dock. And what I mean by mitigation of the damage, repair of the walls, replumbing of some of the retaining walls, and there are a number of areas within the pedestrian way that have settled out of nonconformity with the Americans with Disabilities Act. So stabilization, do nothing, stabilization, repair to bring back to working condition, or demolition and removal. And so with that, I'll let Fernando come and...
Mayor, if I could, quick
Yes.
question.
I just want you to reiterate, or let's reiterate, that your engineering firm came in after the fact, that you had nothing to do with the design or engineering of the original thing. I think that was
That's correct, Mayor.
LAS. Does anybody remember?
Landscape Architectural Services.
Services
Yes,
or
Mayor, good point. Yes, Beacon was an innocent bystander back in the late teens as this project took shape. Landscape Architectural Services was the prime consultant. They had numerous engineering firms that were part of the overall construction document development that went into the construction that we all see today.
Right, thank you. Commissioner Thayer?
Thank you. Just clarification. I know cracks were recently identified, but in your kind of in your summary here leading up to the presentation, you mentioned being out here maybe a year ago, or there were some concerns maybe a year ago last spring. So could you just kind of expand on that a little bit, right?
Yes, sir.
If we've
Absolutely.
got concern, what were the concerns last spring? What was uncovered when those concerns were raised, and then kind of fast forward to, we find cracks.
Sure.
Something we've done in August, and we've got cracks. So just kind of fill in that timeline for me.
Absolutely, happy to. So last spring, Commissioner Matt Laws was approached by the new director of the museum about cracks that were observed between the floor, the edge of the floor, and the wall in the men's restroom on the ground floor of the museum.
Okay, so this was last spring. This
Yes, sir.
wasn't just within the last few months.
Correct. It was, I would say, March, if memory is correct, when when we were first dispatched to the this general area of the city, understanding that we have a steep slope and we've had other landslides on the canal over my years with the city. And so we looked inside at the museum. Then we went looking for, could there be, can we physically see issues? So it was during that visit that we were down on the canal dock, walking around looking for other signs of movement, ground movement, and that's when we first observed the cracks on the westernmost wall, the wall closest to the canal.
Okay, so it was, again, just bear with me for a second. So this is March 24. Museum director, and I can't remember her last name. I know her first name is Heidi, so I apologize to Heidi for that. What's that? Evans. Ms. Evans identified the cracks in the bathroom or in the structure of the building.
Correct.
You came out roughly March-ish timeframe, March, April timeframe, walked the dock, found the cracks
Correct.
in the docks. This is all spring of last year.
Yes, sir. That's
Okay,
correct.
Great, thank you.
Yes, sir. And as I said in my opening remarks, the cracks that we observed in the museum, we have reports from other folks that have a much longer history with the museum. Those cracks have been in those locations for many years, and the reports are that that those cracks are static and just a function of the age of the building.
Okay, so what's in the museum is function of the age of the building, not related to the dock, or you don't know?
That's my understanding, yes, sir. I do not believe that it is a function of the dock construction or the observations that we've made with regard to how the dock has moved and such.
Pose a question. Commissioner Thea, are you done?
I am, yeah, thank you, Mayor.
Commissioner Markert?
Okay.
Remember, we have a presentation.
Yeah, I know, but I just want to put my 2 cents in, or at least I'm the liaison for the museum, and this was brought to my attention at that time, which I think I passed on to the mayor and the public works person who then responded. But there was concern. I would just interject 2 things. One is that there was concern whether or not that those cracks were related to the construction of the dock, that caused cracking or something, which I guess is a reasonable belief, at least at that time. But the other thing I just want to mention for the record, this is a building the city owns. I mean, we're talking about that the museum leases it from the city, but this is our property. So I just want to
Yes, sir.
be clear on that.
The city and the ground, the buildings and the property are city. That is all city
Yeah,
property. Yes,
so-
sir.
yeah, right.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so just to expedite, because as the mayor said, we do have a presentation, so.
Understood.
Fast forward, some studies were done in August.
Yes.
Which led to a next set of studies, which I think is what you're going to talk about today, which were done more recently.
So topographic survey, we field located horizontally and vertically the canal dock in the area where the damage the settlement, the cracks have been observed. And during that survey, In-Situ, Stable Underground came in and conducted cone penetration tests, which Fernando will explain what that is and what it told us. And then the third visit essentially is a follow-up survey, again, for me to be able to report to the board today that we have observed in this particular area of the canal dock that approximately 1 inch of lateral movement. There's unmeasurable settlement, but about 1 inch of lateral movement.
Mayor?
Let me remind the commissioners that to please seek my acknowledgement and give you the floor before speaking. Commissioner Good?
Yeah, thank you. I am elated to hear that you feel the cracks in the museum's bathroom, which, as Commissioner Market has pointed out, is the old ice house. It's a city-owned building, which is used by the museum. So those cracks definitely predated. It was either the fall of 2020 or the spring of 2021, where the city announced that all the trees on the embankment were an invasive species, and the city paid almost $100,000 to remove all those trees, which to me is behind a lot of the reason that the dock is as settled as it has because of erosion and the trees are gone. So, but you're certain the cracks in the museum's bathroom are long-standing and developed way before, let's say, fall of 2020?
So my first observation of these cracks was in March of 2024, so I'm going based on what the Commissioner reported to Director Matlaws, that the cracks have been there for many years.
So perhaps, have you looked at the brick walkway, which is sort of the kickoff to the Junction and Breakwater Trail? Does
Yes.
that seem intact and undamaged at this point by the pulling of the dock and the erosion of the embankment?
Sure. Yes. As of our last site visit, there does not appear to be any damage to any of the assets that are at the top of bank and in the courtyard area between the ice house and the canal.
I appreciate that. I'm just all for mitigation at this point because of, my past involvement beginning in February of 2020 when this project was approved. Thank you.
Certainly.
Let's move on to your
Sure.
presentation,
So with that, Fernando is really the star of the show today. I'm really just the opening act. So with that, I'll turn it over to Fernando.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning, Frank.
How I can share the screen so.
Henry will help set you up.
Yeah, so. Mayor, can you, or Ann, can you switch over? Oh, okay, very good. Thank you. All right. I'm sorry, this is in PowerPoint or this is a PDF now? It's a PDF. Oh, it's a PDF, okay. Well, again, my name is Fernando Garcia. I'm a geotechnical engineer, civil engineer by education, more than 40 years doing this. And well, we got involved here. We proposed definitely to do 3 different points of investigation. And the reason why is because 3 points by geometry define a plane. So if we can define in 3 different locations how the strata goes, we can put all together in 3D and figure it out how the layers of soil are interacting, and then the geometry of the slope. So this in back is just basically a little bit of background for my company. I've been working in United States for 25 years, but this is my business that we have already a little bit more than 3 years in business. Okay, so when we were retained to do the slope stability evaluation, I said we generate a program of exploration to determine the properties of the soils. And then, of course, the first thing that we did was come and see, and the floating dock is supplemented with the ramps. The ramps are, the ground around the ramps are supported with what is called MSE walls, so mechanically stabilized earth, which is basically earth placed with geosynthetic, geotextile, geogrid, and a fascia of stone or concrete blocks. Well, this thing, let me see in a second, here is the ramp. Basically, here is the outyard of the museum. And so, and this is where I'm sorry, I just got a little different whatever I have in PowerPoint, but we locate here one test, then another one here, then we remove the fence and did as deeper as we go or as lower on the slope, completely at the beginning of the first ramp. So that basically to create the 3 points that we can join and know the geometry of the soils involved in that. So to start with the cone, so normally people is very familiar with what is called a standard penetration test, which is an auger, then we drop on a spoon and count blows and grab samples. In this methodology, we don't grab samples. The cone is just a probe that basically has a sleeve, friction, has a tip, and basically have strain gauges here to measure the stress as it penetrates, measure the stresses as it goes down the friction against this little portion of the cone. And this porous media here, the blue part, is just to measure the water as we displace the ground as we penetrate. This test is standardized to penetrate 2 centimeters per second, so basically like a quasi-static. We don't create any waves, we don't create any impact, any dynamic load, so basically we just reading stresses as we go down. From the combination of, this is what we read, this is what we did here, so this is QC, is whatever this tip is measuring. This second column is the friction, and this is the water pressure as we go down. One thing that concerns a little bit is at the bottom of this slope, after pretty much at 50 feet, is a very soft layer of clay. That is mostly what is creating the problem, and I'm gonna go a little further on how we evaluate that and how we came with that conclusion, and what needs to be done to remedy this situation. As we go to these soft layers, we also can stop, and the water, as is displaced by the tool as penetration, increase the water pressure, the groundwater, and we call this excess of pore pressure, this part here. So we stop the test and let it run and keep measuring the water pressure until basically dissipates that excess of pressure. And with that, we're gonna go, we can know the hydraulic conductivity of that soil and the time of consolidation, if that is the process that is happening. So basically, the water going out of the clay because the new weight imposed by the ramps and the ezVOLTz. And that is basically the situation here. So we did that in the 3 locations. So as we can see, pretty much the sites are pretty sandy, consistent. Everything that is yellow is sand, whatever is green is silt, and whatever is just green bluish is just clayey material. So definitely the 3 locations show the deep clay layer, and that is the beginning of our evaluation. So we also check the settlement, which is evaluated under the new imposed loads that are there right now, how much has still to go, which is settlement-wide is not too much, 0.14 inches, 0.10 inches, that is pretty much not. But then later, along the time, is gonna go another 0.10, so total, we're talking about 1/4 of an inch. So the vertical movement, and Bob basically confirmed it, that now has been observed is more lateral displacement and not vertical displacement. So that, well, is good in regards with the clayey layer, but we have very other situation that is more concerning. Now, this is the slope. This is trying to model the ramps here, and when we do the slope stability analysis, what we got is that the safety factor in the 3 sections evaluated was between 1 and 1.1. Okay, in a standard practice, and a slope stability safety factor. What is the safety factor? Safety factor is that the acting forces, all the way that is involved, is creating active forces. And the ground, through the phi angle and the cohesion, is creating reactive forces. So both needs to be, the reactive should be greater than 1.4 to have a stable slope. If they are around 1, okay, the measurement that we did is in 3 locations, and these can have a little precision or variation. So then that means the slope is completely unstable. So the tendency of the slope is to go down, basically is what is going right now. At least that we be able to stabilize and create more reactive forces than then increase the safety factor and at least to 1.4, and we can say that the slope is gonna be completely stable. And jumping a little bit on this, but whatever Bob was talking about stabilization, what we are proposing is to place here, well, we think this as a spoon. So this is moving on this way. This is gonna come here and go to the canal. So if we place some weight here, basically riprap, we're gonna increase the reacting forces, and then we're gonna increase the safety factor, and this thing is gonna stabilize. It's not gonna move anymore. That's basically the final solution. So we did that and look at that. This is section A. I go back here, and section A was done right here, pretty much at the beginning of at the end of the first ramp. Then this one at the middle of the first ramp, and then pretty much completely to the, let's say, the south part of the ramp. And here down is where we see some cracks in the ezVOLTz, and we see definitely the movement in this portion of the structure. So, well, that is reflected also in the results. Let's say the north part is 1.1, at least is, yes, unstable, but let's say barely unstable. But B is 1. B is like, okay, so just the middle is gonna come down anytime, It's like no guarantees there. And C, which is also where we see the cracks, is also 1. So definitely it's unstable, okay? So, and here is the potential solution, which is at the toe, install riprap, then it's gonna increase the reactive loads, and the slope is gonna become completely stable. Now, the distressed cracks that are there now can be not even remediated, just fill it with some sealer for the cracks to do not let the water keep going through the cracks, and Is what it is. We cannot move the ezVOLTz, we cannot move the ramps. That's going to stay as it is. But we can stabilize the toe to be sure that it's not going to move anymore. That's basically what we have.
Any questions? Commissioner Saunders, please.
Mr. Garcia, if we were to just remove the concrete ramps, would that solve some of our problem?
You mean the concrete ramps, including the ezVOLTz?
Just take them all out.
Everything, yes, that could be a solution, but then keep in mind that now we have a very steep slope. So we removed the way that was part of the problem, but then we need to regrade it properly to manage the water, and at least to be, I would say, probably not 1-to-1, but at least, you know, 1/2 slope that be and revegetated and all that stuff. Also, one thing that I forgot to mention, but for one of the concerns with the museum and everything, this thing that I am showing in each one of the sections is the most critical. So we analyze more than 1,000 sections. Well, the software, I do not do 1,000, but the software does 1,000. These are the critical. So neither one goes further than this portion. Let me be clear here. So in the event that all this stuff collapses, never is going to involve even this area. It's not going to go further than that. So it's going to be pretty localized, this, let's say the most catastrophic situation, everything is sliced down and goes, that's what it is. Not going to go and affect the museum at all, so far. Of course, now, if we remove everything, left an unstable slope is what we call a retrogressive failure, so then it's going to start going back and back and back and back until finally got everything in compromise. So, but yeah, definitely removing everything, revegetating is an option. Or placing the riprap, stabilizing, and keep it.
Thank you.
You wait, all right?
At our previous meeting, I think, Henry, you indicated two possible reparations. One would be to put riprap or stone near the base, if I recall correctly, and the other one had to do with, I think, sheet pilings. There were two methods.
That is also an option, and it's coming more and more in fashion now that instead of riprap at the toe, you just put a set of sheet piling or piles.
At the toe.
At the toe, correct. So then it's a retention. It's pretty much like a bulkhead. So you put here the retention and this thing. So this plane is a shear plane failure. This. So if we put some obstacles here, it's not going to create. It's going to cut that plane of failure. That's what it is. Now, which one is more cost effective? I cannot comment on that.
Okay, I guess a couple of my thoughts or questions are, placement of large riprap at the bottom sounds fairly easy. Sheet piles scares me more because of what I've seen. The installation methodology for sheet piles is, of late has been vibratory type installation, and seems to me if we did that we'd vibrate and the whole hill would slough off.
And there is I was involved during the construction of that. I was working for another company, and I came to inspect and certify the helical piles that are there. And I remember there was helical piles and other piles because, it was a lot of set of vibratory monitors because there is some sewer line or something that is highly sensitive there. So chip piling or pile driving is going to be a really tough condition. Yeah, so basically riprap, leave us only one option, the riprap.
A couple more comments. One is, if you recall at the last meeting, Henry and Bob, I mentioned that I was somewhat involved with the LRCIA, but I wasn't a board member. I think Pat just came in. She was a member of the board. But I had brought up the question of liability and for the engineer, the designer, because it seemed to me that was a very steep slope out there, and I was very worried about it sloughing off more and doing more damage. And the engineer, my recollection is the engineer said, "Oh no, we're going to engineer this properly, and it's going to last forever," kind of a thing. So I guess my question is, if we effect repairs here this time, what are our guarantees? For instance, Is there such thing as a guarantee, or is it just we have to live with it? Are we going, maybe this is a question for Taylor, are we going after the original designer? You know, does the contract say that they have a liability and give us a guarantee? You know, in other words, why put money into something if there's no guarantees that it's going to last a longer time? Any responses, Bob? Or
For the rewrap, in my opinion, yes, it is. It's a guarantee. You know, this is like a simple. This slope stability solution is the most simple. Just add some weight to the toe so you increase the safety factor.
Okay.
Once the safety factors are about 1.4, yes, I can guarantee it's going to work. And it has qualifications. Provided we control the water, that is not, you know, water going somewhere in the back, or we have a water main above that breaks and then all the water goes down and create another failure plane. But other than that, the slope stabilized with riprap is a guarantee.
What size riprap are you talking about? Are you talking about stones like this?
Yeah, I don't recall exactly. In the report would be like a type 1, maybe? Yeah, the one that has at least like a 2 feet. Yes, a big one. It's 1.5 to 2 feet the diameter riprap. I think so. It's class A1.
And so do we have to dismantle part of what is there to be able to place the riprap on 100%
No.
width?
No, it's just, there is, I don't know if here I can show you. No, this one is not clear. You have one of your plans that be more, but here, this area is like let's say like a little bay. So we can just especially come here. Well, here is actually, yes. We come here and start placing the stone.
Okay.
And actually, I was commenting, Bob, even can be done in 2 phases. Put the initial, you know, for budget purposes, could be put initial one amount and then supplement it to completely finish the regrading with riprap.
Before I go to you, Commissioner Gossett, I'm just going to put one more question out there, maybe for the city manager, and that is there's been bantering back and forth about just remove the darn thing. I just want to remind everybody we got a lot of grants to help pay for that, and so I think you've done some research. We don't need that now, or let me come back to you to give us your scoop on your interpretation of that. Commissioner Gossett?
Thank you, Mayor. Maybe address this to Mr. Palmer. I remember, and I've gone back through the minutes, and I'm unable to find it, but I distinctly remember that when this project first came before us, just the concept design, the city authorized and paid for a geotechnical survey of that section of property. I can't find it anywhere in my record, so I don't know if perhaps in your research you found anything, or the city manager or our staff could go back and see if that was completed, in fact. I know, again, I believe we authorized a payment for that as in anticipation of this.
Sure.
I don't know.
I confirm that we did indeed do that.
Okay.
Yeah,
And is the
it would
report
be
available?
nice.
I'm just
Where-
curious that
where
we can
is it?
find.
Yeah.
And then secondly, just to remind everyone, the city does own the building, but the city leases the property from the Army Corps of Engineers. So all of these things we're talking about, if you look at the contract that we signed with them in 2021, it's a 25-year contract. It has specific call-outs about restoration, all of this information. So I'm not sure if the Army Corps has been brought into this conversation yet, or if the plan is a path forward is to come up with a solution and then approach the Army Corps. But they've got to be a part of this discussion because the city does not own that land, it only leases it.
Sure.
So
Sure.
I'm just curious if that has been brought into the equation.
Yeah, so Commissioner Gossett, we have had, Director Matlaws and I have had at least one meeting with the representatives of the Army Corps of Engineers. We brought them in because twofold: one, to make them aware of the issues that we've encountered, and also to discuss the canal dredging that is being planned to ensure that one doesn't affect the other.
Correct.
So they are aware of it, and you are correct. There will be permits and approvals that will be required for whatever mitigation, maintenance, whatever solution is ultimately decreed to occur. The Corps and DENREC will both be involved in those approval of those solutions.
So I'm just, again, I don't know where we're going with this honestly, but to me, it's permits, et cetera, that's all additional cost regarding, it's not just the cost of the riprap, if this is a solution, and the installation, but also the permitting process. So it's, all of these have to be figured into the cost of the doing business. Thank you.
Mayor?
Commissioner Bunky, Markert, and then you.
The only question I just have is, at what point are we assured that whatever is taking place, I assume the Army Corps in their proposal to dredge the canal, which I suppose can change as a result of activities within government now? I don't know, I mean, to me, I'm just curious as to how firm these, proposals, future proposals are going to be. But is that, would that be changing your, I'm just saying, assuming that they dig out part of the canal, does that change the engineering? No. I mean, would we be taking muck out and putting stone in? Is that kind of the idea, or whatever?
So the Corps is dredging the channel of the canal, which we are landward of the channel. The Corps limits how far structures can be placed within navigable waters. So the distance between where the dredging is slated to occur and where the riprap is scheduled to be placed, there's space between them, so that the work that presumably the city would do to stabilize this structure would be independent of the Corps and exclusive in that one would not affect the other.
Okay. And just a sort of a technical question, because am I to understand that riprap, in so doing, displacing the water, displacing the soil, is denser than water and soil? Is that the idea? It's like you're basically placing more mass there, and that's the object?
Yeah, more weight per unit of volume. So yeah, what is now right there is the mud line, and this riprap is going to penetrate that mud line and then increase more weight. And then we put like let's say total, it's like a triangle. Like we say, we put 4 feet of riprap, 4 to 5 feet is going to be enough weight.
Okay, all right.
Yes.
Commissioner Good?
This is very troubling to me, and I don't fault you engineers whatsoever, although you have now added, apparently, I found out last night, $17,000 for this study you carried out, plus any presentation costs today for your time. My problem is, let's just go back to how guarantees on this particular project have worked in the past. We were told landscape architecture offered a 1-year guarantee, but even when they installed substandard gates, which had like an opening where like a 15-month-old, like a toddler could walk right through, they were paid to replace those gates. And when I asked why they didn't have to do that at no charge to the city, I was sort of met with a blank stare. So let's just recap. I hear Mr. Tedder is at some subsequent time going to present all the grants he thinks will cover this. Well, this project was funded supposedly with grants and no taxpayer money except for the design costs, which I think were probably almost $100,000. Then the city threw in $80,000 in tree removal. Then a promissory note, which was given to the city against the judgment of several commissioners who advocated against it, was not repaid. It was $280,000. The only thing repaid of that $280,000 was $8,000. So now we're going to sink more money into something that I'm glad you raised the risk to me. The more erosion there is, that is the location chosen, unfortunately, backs up to the ocean outfall pipe. That's one of the, it runs, I believe, along Canal Street and then along right behind the dock. Then it follows a non-waterfront route along Henlopen Avenue. So we're dealing with an area that we really want to preserve. We don't want the erosion. It seems now it might be difficult to plant those trees again, which were holding that embankment together. But I don't want to go down this route. We can talk about grants. This has already cost taxpayers almost $500,000, and we're being told the riprap repair would cost $400,000. There's just like no end in sight, and I hope we can come to a consensus that this was a poorly chosen location because of the steepness and because of the proximity to this ocean outfall pipe, which is now slated to carry, by the way, another 5 million gallons a day in another couple of years than it does now. So a lot of this is to me, we're not spending time effectively because this is too expensive for this city to repair. I'm in favor of this demolition and removal hearing. I don't think there are ever any guarantees because I saw how the guarantee from landscape architecture failed.
So, Mayor, if I may, Commissioner Good, I didn't necessarily hear a question in there, but I would like to offer a little bit of commentary if I could. You are correct. There is the ocean outfall force main runs parallel to the canal in that location. We also have one of the two cities' main water distribution feeds that run through that area. So it is definitely an area that begs to be protected forever. I'm not sure why the trees were removed. I can tell you from past experience that trees on slopes, especially steep slopes, are problematic and really shouldn't be there. There are other more effective stabilization methods for protecting slopes. And I'll give an example. Back in the December of 2015, there was a very large tree that decided to take a swim in the canal at the corner of Canal and 6th Street. And through some emergency permits that we were provided by both the Corps and DENREC, the city hired a contractor to retrieve the tree, rebuild the stormwater outfall that ran through that area, and stabilize the slopes. And as far as a demolition and removal of the dock, I would encourage you all to take a look at that area and how that was stabilized. That's essentially what that slope would look like if the canal dock were removed. And I say that the trees on slopes are not a good idea. It's essentially what Mr. Garcia has been speaking to, in that the weight of things. In this case, it's a canal dock. It's a concrete structure. That weight is causing instability of the slope through geologic means. Trees, first they're small, they get larger and larger and larger, and because the tree that fell into the canal, and there are others up and down the canal that have fallen, some fall into the canal, some just fall down the slope, they get to a point where the soil, there's not enough soil structure to support the weight of that tree. And so by placing trees in the area, initially that may be good for the root mat to stabilize, but there's other lighter, low ground type materials that plant materials that might be applicable.
Bob, let's Taylor, I want to turn to you, but I want to clarify what the conversation is. The conversation, as far as I recall, is not about grants going forward and how to repair this, but it's past grants that we've received and whether or not there are any restrictions or conditions on being able to remove the project in entirety.
Sure, Mayor. So staff did investigate all of the funding sources that came with the canal dock, and there are no restrictions based on any grants or funding that we received on keeping the dock.
So in other words, Pete Schwarzkopf lent money, or Senator Ernie Lopez helped get us money. Others groups helped get us money. And so what I'm hearing is there's no restriction on disallowing us from removing the project in entirety, but it's more of an perhaps more of an optics thing, you know, to get money from the state and then trash something. Anybody else up here? Before we go to the members of the public?
Well, Mayor.
Commissioner Good?
I mean, I'm not an engineer, full disclosure, but to hear that trees are somehow detrimental, I mean, you know, yes, I mean, trees, we just actually had to remove a dead tree. Trees do die or fall. So to tell us, you're telling us that canal, steep embankments like that, those trees, by the way, which were removed at almost $100,000 cost to city taxpayers back in it was either the fall of 2020 or the spring of 2021, some of them had been there for several hundred years. So yes, I did see that tree that fell into the canal. In fact, Mr. Tedder sent me a photo of it. I'm biking along there. I see these things, but a certain percentage of trees are that's their lifespan. So I don't know. I feel, are you saying that there's no possibility of replanting any small species of trees on that steep embankment if the dock were to be removed?
Yes, actually I am. I would discourage planting of anything that could act as a sail and be affected by the wind. So low growth shrubbery, there are vines and other types of native species that can be planted that create robust root systems that would essentially have the same effect as as a young tree would. The issue with trees is that not only do they get heavier as they mature, they also are subject to wind action. And during rain events, during certain times of the year when the water table is higher, the pour pressure that Mr. Garcia spoke about, all of that plays into the stability of the slope. And again, the tree, the larger it gets, the heavier it gets, the taller it gets, the more likely that the reactive forces of that tree trying to withstand the force of the wind can cause them to topple and create some of the issues that we are seeing up and down the canal.
Oh, fair enough. I mean, if you have other, shrubs or whatever, I'm
Sure.
not against those either, but,
Sure.
yeah.
Thank
you.
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Saunders?
I just want to point out, I believe we have two separate issues here. We have a problem with the land going into the canal, a landslide, issue number one. And then we have a separate issue of whether or not we need a dock. Whether or not we need a dock is irrelevant to the fact that the landslide is happening. Am I correct?
I'm concerned about the landslide.
Right. Right. That's all. Thank you.
All right, well, I'm going to move to members of the public. If you'd like to speak, there's a three-minute opportunity. If you would come up, state your name and relationship to the city. There's a timer on the wall over there. Keep an eye on it. Here, go ahead, Pat.
All right, Pat Carluzzi, 41 Sussex Street. I was the president of the Lewis-Rehoboth Canal Improvement Association. This project was envisioned, wow, about 12 years ago. In fact, Mayor Mills was on the board at the time.
Well, I was never
Or you
on-
were
never on the board.
participating. You were never
Watcher.
on the
A
board?
watcher.
Okay. So in any case, my concern here is, well, several-fold. One is there's some idea that people don't want to use the dock. I don't think that's true at all. There's been scheduled through Cape Water Taxi twice a week. There's been special trips that people have taken that are nature-oriented. And so I think that one of the things is that it is a public dock and a lot of people use it. In fact, other tour companies have used it on occasion. And I think if the city thought of it as an asset, it could be used a lot more, which is, I'm very disappointed that that hasn't happened. But however, let me just tell you that as far as the grants are concerned, we received $300,000 from the DelDOT for this project, for Transportation's Alternative. We received a bond bill appropriation of $200,000 from the General Assembly. Community transportation funds from Representative Schwarzkopf was $50,000. From Senator Lopez was $100,000. Then you have Dogfish has contributed $75,000. The Shell family has contributed upwards of $100,000. Crystal Foundation gave us a grant for $150,000. You know, was a lot of interest in this project, and I think that it would look poorly for the city to just throw it away. And I'm not sure I understand why. People do enjoy the dock. I don't know why there's some idea up here that it's not useful. And in fact, it's a park like anything else you have. It's not, I have read some things about, gee, it's not making us any money. Well, do the other parks make you money? I don't think so. I think it would be a travesty to just rip this out. And I don't think that necessarily, we haven't talked about the cost of what that would be. It's probably a lot cheaper to put the riprap in. But I don't know that. I'm sure somebody could share that information with us. So I would ask you why you feel it's so necessary to tear out this dock. What is it about the dock that is a problem, other than there is an issue right now? By the way, I might even have a copy of the document of the original borings that were done back in the day when Sam Cooper was mayor. That was performed. I think I might even have that information. So in any case, the idea of pulling it out just seems like, no, well, there's a public too that have made significant donations because of the dock, because they wanted the dock. People kayak there now. People go and just sit down there because it's a nice view. So I would ask the question to you, why do you want to tear this out? Thank you.
Thank you, Pat. Lisa, your name and relationship to the city, please?
Lisa Schlosser. I'm a full-time resident here in the city, and I just urge the commissioners to really think strategically about how we're going to go forward with this dock. I mean, please don't take the dock down. This was a capital investment paid for 80% by state grants, by private investors, by individuals like me, like maybe some of the people on this board, and approximately 20% of the city, of the funding came from the city, per the MOU that the city signed regarding with the LCRI. I don't remember that, but anyway, the nonprofit. We committed to an agreement, and the agreement, which I included in my comments to you, basically said that they would pay about 80%. We agreed to pay $280. They agreed to, read the MOU, Suzanne, read the MOU. It says they will attempt to pay back that $280 based on their fundraising efforts. That's what it says. They did not commit. There was no note. There was no anything except in the MOU. They committed to pay us back as they raised more money. They only raised $8,000 more. Some of the costs went up, et cetera. But bottom line, this is a capital investment by somebody else. It is used by Cape Water Taxi. It was on their website. Dogfish uses it. Kayakers and stand-up paddleboarders use it. So the bottom line, we can come up with a plan to generate revenue from this dock, okay? We can charge for parking. We can have permits. We can have services like the kayak rental, which we did a bid. So much misinformation out there. We did a bid. 2 companies bid on providing the kayak service. We selected one, and then it was killed. You know who killed it, so somebody up here, which I don't know why. If the city reneges on this commitment to maintain this dock, we might discourage future private and state funding into our projects. It's very embarrassing if the city cannot be trusted to stand up to its commitments, which we signed in the MOU. The other thing is, with all due respect to you guys, you sure seem to know your business. We have one bidder on this project, one set of solutions from one company. We did not go out for 3 bids on this. We did not go back to the original developer, Thompson. We didn't go back to Landscape Architectural Services. We didn't go to the Army Corps of Engineers or anybody else to do a study like this. We went to one vendor. You never go to one vendor. You go to 3 vendors and get different options and different pricing. It's always what you do. All right. The second recommendation is we need to create a plan to generate revenue. There's all kind of ways. And finally, for your own personal reputations, do you want to continue to be known as the Board of Commissioners that kill revenue opportunities? You already lost Deauville. You're already kind of flamming on the, I don't know if that's even a word, but on the Ocean Outfall deal. And
Thank you,
you're now going to
Lisa.
lose the revenue from this. So thank you.
And again, we do have your correspondence. Tom?
Tom Gaynor, property owner in Rehoboth. 2 things, substantive and procedural. Substantively, I'm not an engineer. I'm just lucky enough to have played one, unfortunately, on a number of projects that I paid for. The Romans learned that you couldn't build something that was enduring on water without concrete and pilings. I'm not sure why this was built the way it was built. Again, I'm not an engineer, but lucky enough to have played one in my own life. So I'm not quite sure how riprap solves an erosion problem with all the weight that's on a weak slope of clay without concrete and pilings. But that's up to the engineers that are getting paid for this. The second is procedural. The more we insulate ourselves on the commission and the city manager from any interaction with the public, and the imposition of rules that don't allow for any accountability for the constituents to ask questions of the people ostensibly who are paying the ever-increasing amounts of our money that are getting taken from us. In 2018, the budget was about $19 million. The last time the Eagles won the Super Bowl was $19 million. Now, 7 years later, it's almost 43. And I'm not allowed to ask a simple question of the city manager during his continually ineffective and incomplete reports to the public and to the board. And none of you asked the question that I've recommended repeatedly. Looking at you, Craig, where are we on the budget? Where are we against budget? And what's the delta that this is costing us on an unanticipated fashion? It's a simple question. It's one every project manager asks. You're the project managers, and none of you asked the question. So continue, Stan, to isolate our accountability opportunities for you, and you'll continue to make silly and stupid decisions. The entitled folks who were screaming about Patrick's ridiculous policy about the trailers, the guy who was yelling for you to act moved. A month later, Mike Gaffney, who demanded you act on his behalf, and you guys were chumps enough to do it, put his house up for sale 3 weeks later and moved. For God's sake, will you not be better with our money?
Thank you, Tom. Walter, you want to say anything? Nope. All right. I'm bringing it back up to this table. We don't have to make any decisions today. In fact, it's not on the agenda to consider any particular direction.
Mayor?
Commissioner Good?
Yeah, I have read over the memorandum of understanding. I would say that our city solicitor at the time, Glenn Mandalis, who was directed to create this memorandum of understanding, in spite of opposition from at least one commissioner who felt that the LRCIA needed to continue to fundraise because there was a missing $280,000. He did the city a disservice. There's some ambiguity in the language. However, the understanding at the meeting, which asked him to craft this memorandum of understanding, was that the LRCIA would continue to fundraise and would repay the city the $280,000. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. We had design costs, we had tree removal, we had remediation of the gates, installation of security cameras, because apparently that wasn't in the original specs. We've had pressure washing costs. Mr. Tedder tells me the streets department's been able to do that, but that's their time and labor. And I do recognize that some people enjoy using the dock. I live close enough to it, though. It's mostly bereft of people. Like even in the summer, you might a couple times a day see a boat tie up there, or some people out of curiosity going down there to get acquainted with this fairly new dock. But the return on investment has been abysmal. Like if the number of people using it compared to the cost to the city, which I believe is about almost $500,000 already with continued maintenance costs we have to bear. By the way, in February of 2020, the nonprofit claimed they would recruit volunteers to do all landscaping and maintenance on this dock. That was another promise they made that they didn't keep. So I think when you see the return on investment is very poor per user, you don't have to be embarrassed that you made a mistake. You have to cut your losses sometimes. So, you know, I know some of these people who've used it feel it's this precious asset that we have to preserve. I wish they would look at the cost per kayaker for this, or per passenger on that twice a week, only from early June until Labor Day, of Cape water taxis. And as some of you may remember, this was pushed. We used a lot of federal and state taxpayer money. That, to me, also was not a good use of money, because we were told this would take commuters off Route 1. It hasn't taken a single car off Route 1. So something like $500,000 of federal and state taxpayer money. I pay I pay income taxes in Delaware. A lot of you do. Federal taxes. I mean, you know, this project is beginning to look like some of those USAID projects, which benefit a few select people.
Please don't go there.
Including
Jeez.
if you, Dogfish Head, by the way, it's $75,000 contribution allowed it to build its own little dock on Gills Neck Road to ferry its in-guests to Rehoboth and back. So they had an ulterior motive in donating $75,000, which was tax deductible to Dogfish Head on their corporate income taxes. So I hope we don't think that just because a few people benefit from the dock, it makes sense for taxpayers to throw another $500,000 at this dock.
Mayor, if I could, please.
Commissioner Thayer?
Thank you. I'd like to go back to Commissioner Saunders' point from earlier, which is there's really two issues here. Integrity of the dock, and do we need a dock? So I kind of want to stick with the first one, which is integrity of the dock. And that, to me, that means we do have to make a decision. Obviously, you know, we can't make a decision today because we couldn't vote on something today, but we do need to understand the cost of the two options. We're talking about budget later this afternoon. We're looking to approve a budget. So yes, we are at the point where we need to make a decision. At the last meeting, I know myself, I think some others as well, we're also looking to understand the cost of either removing or shutting the dock down. I'm not, by saying I still want to see that, that shouldn't be interpreted as I'm in favor of doing that, but we've got to make a decision on the integrity of the dock. I think what I heard from Mr. Garcia is that if we do nothing is really not an option. If we do nothing, the dock is going to continue to slide into the canal, and he's shaking his head yes over there. So it needs to be addressed. So I'd just like to get that path forward. We should probably get some bids to put in the riprap. We should probably understand what it's going to cost to remove it. And then as we go forward with the budget cycle, we can make the decision on what path we're going to take. But beyond that, I don't think we should be spending any more money on this project until we have those two things, and then we decide as part of the budget process what the next step is.
Thank you, Craig. For Mr. Garcia or Bob, we've just talked about one potential solution, and that's to add riprap to try to preserve the structure that's there. Yes. If we decided to take out the structure is riprap still needed to protect the slope from sloughing and possibly negatively impacting the outfall pipe?
Yes, regardless of whether we stabilize the structure or remove the structure, riprap will be required in whichever option you select.
To the same extent. So if we're estimating 400,000 to put riprap in to protect the existing structure, then we would also be putting 400,000 in there to protect.
You probably
the
need
slope.
less because you remove part of the wave, but then you're gonna need a lot of benching and stabilization of the slope. So then the slope needs to be regraded.
There's still, one point is there's still going to be cost whether we tear out the structure or we retain the
Yeah,
structure.
you're gonna have an extra cost.
Right, okay.
Understand that. I mean, I understand there's going to be
Commissioner Thayer, go
costs.
ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Understand there's going to be costs either way, but let's just understand what the two options and what the costs are. And again,
And repeat your two questions that you'd like.
Again, I'm going to look at Mr. Garcia again, but if I'm understanding correctly, do nothing is not an option.
Right.
So we either have to put the riprap in to stabilize it, do some sealing of the concrete. There's some other associated things that would need to be done so it gets back into working condition, right? So there's a cost for that. Option two would be to do something either to decommission it or remove it, and that would be a cost. So just understanding what those two costs would be. And again, as I ask for these two costs, I'm now looking to the public, don't interpret it as I have an opinion either way. I just think it's important that we understand what those two costs are.
That is correct, yes.
Okay. That's what those two options, thank you. That's what I'm looking for.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
Anybody else?
And just, I'm sorry, and just as part of our budget cycle here, if we're going to put money in the budget, we can make a decision on which of those two options are and get the money in the budget. Does that make sense?
Commissioner Saunders.
I just wanted to ask Mr. Tedder, now that we've established, and I think we agree that the museum is not involved, could we separate the museum and fix that? Fix the wall in the museum?
It's the floor, and yes, we can.
It's significant. I went over and looked at it. It's a significant crack.
Yeah, we can work on that. Ultimately, what I'm hearing is you'd like staff to bring back the costs of A, removal, and B, just the riprap stabilization. So I will plan.
Sealing of concrete done, right? Total cost all in.
Good. Okay. Well, we will do that and schedule it as soon as possible once we get that together.
Do you think you can have that for our next budget meeting on the 21st?
We'll shoot for that, but I can't make a promise.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Mayor, I have a question for Mr. Tedder.
Did you have something?
Yeah, just
Commissioner Gossett, and then.
thank you. Just as a point of reference, I know there's discussion of the MOU with the organization, the Lewis Roboth Canal Improvement Association. Point of record on that, that organization dissolved in December of 2022. So depending on the strength of the MOU, whatever, that organization no longer exists.
Well, and let me just interject. I think the MOU, that was a good lesson. You know, I think some people thought that the MOU had the strength of a contract, and it doesn't. It's more like a gentleman's agreement, if you will. Commissioner Good?
Oh, well, about the MOU, many of us in February of 2020 begged the commission not to resort to this MOU because the incentive for the nonprofit to fundraise evaporated, and that's indeed what happened. I mean, they did apparently repay $8,000 of the $280,000, but that, you know, with all the other costs we incurred, it's trivial. But my main problem, Mr. Tedder, is we've now paid Beacon Engineering over $17,000 for this slope evaluation they presented. Are we going to be able to get estimates for, this is just a landscaping project for stabilizing the slope in the event that the dock were to be removed? And also, I mean, I'm not as interested in the estimate, but whatever, for stabilizing the dock. I think, you know, we can be optimistic as obviously the people who advocate for this dock and have advocated for it in the past will be. But we have a bad history that, once we commit to something, there are always change orders, cost overruns. I think this is an endless money pit and has been basically since the memorandum of understanding was entered into foolishly. So can you assure us we just spent $17,000 on Beacon doing this. Can you assure us we're not going to spend another $20,000 looking at options?
Yeah, we don't have to spend any more on this until you make a decision on what you'd like to do. I think Bob might be able to touch on this, related to the estimates, but we should be able to get estimates on riprap and demolition / removal.
That's, I'm sorry, Mayor, if I could, please.
Commissioner Thayer?
I guess before I forget, I just want to thank Lisa and Pat for their comments, particularly Pat. I knew that a large portion of this was paid for with grants, but I didn't understand the particulars of where the money came from, so I really appreciate you taking the time to come this morning and make your comments. We don't have the resources internally, and I think I know the answer to this because, we required Beacon just to do an RFP for landscaping services. We don't have the resources internally to get proposals or estimates without Beacon.
I think we can get estimates and proposals.
Okay. And I think that goes to, I think my comment earlier and Commissioner Good's comment, which is that, we really don't want to spend any more money on this. Get us back the costs on the options, and then we can make a decision on how to move forward.
Understood. Thank you.
Great, thanks.
So I just want to reiterate, in my mind, we've got two things we're looking toward. One is, both are pricing. One is for the removal, restoration, and stabilization utilizing riprap, and the other is utilizing riprap to stabilize and restore. That would, of course, influence our future discussion and our path forward. So we'll work, Taylor, let me know when you can get that done as soon as you can, and we'll put this on a future agenda. Great. All right. Thank you. Last word? Go ahead. Commissioner Marker, go ahead.
I wanted to say I certainly concur with the comments of Commissioner Thayer, and I think the path forward that you're proposing, I think, is also wise. But I do want to say this constant harping on how much we paid in the past and all this stuff, and that somehow predicts or presages what we're going to do in the future, I think, is foolish. And I think the discussion that we're proposing, I think what we want is what is best for the city moving forward. We're doing something in the future to hopefully ameliorate the problems we have with the structural integrity of the dock. But I also want to say that in one scenario, when you tear it out, you don't have a dock anymore, and the other one you do. So I think we need to also consider the utility of the dock and what the potential value of preserving the dock is. I think that should also be part of the equation. So I just want to say that.
I think that'll be part of the next conversation. Okay. So we're going to draw this to a close and move on to our next item of new business, which is thank you, Bob and Mr. Garcia. Thank you very much. Presentation by ezVOLTz on a proposal to install new EV charging stations.
Mayor, let me give a little bit of a brief overview on this. So electric vehicle charging stations are one of the things that was included in the capital budget that was presented at our last budget meeting. I did want to mention that currently the city has two dual head charge point chargers here in the City Hall Convention Center parking lot. And previously we had electric vehicle chargers out near the Henlopen Hotel and Condo development. There is still infrastructure there related to electrical, but those charging stations were originally actually built by, I think, the University of Delaware and were no longer serviceable, so they were removed. And then the chargers were put here. Those are level 2 chargers, which are, of course, faster than a typical 110 outlet. I'll save the tech jargon for ezVOLTz. But anyway, we were approached by ezVOLTz related to how we could move forward on new chargers for our clientele that come here to this wonderful resort community. And they will also touch on how we can do a revenue payback model on the chargers related to that. So I'll go ahead and either turn it over to Henry. Okay. So I will have the ezVOLTz team come up to introduce themselves.
And while they're getting ready, let me just mention Willett Kempton was from the University of Delaware Center for Carbon-Free Power, and he's the one that brought to the city many years ago a grant opportunity for 2 EV charging stations that were installed close proximity to the ocean. The grants were free, except our design and installation was our cost of it. What we found is they tended to be problematic sat close to the ocean, perhaps because of the salt spray or whatever reason. So just some little background. So those, I believe, have they been removed, or
They have not been there for a while.
so they're still in place, I guess, but are they functional?
No.
They're gone. They're gone. Okay. Very good. Mr. Gillespie, if you want to introduce your team there, and we'll turn it over to you.
Great. Thanks for having us. Before I start, I wanted to let you guys know Rehoboth is a special place. I've been coming here my whole life. It's my first beach I've ever gone to, my first rides at a boardwalk. I was fortunate enough to buy a house here. I live a half block from here on Maryland Avenue, and we've had that property for 13 years. And so it's great to be able to try to help the city. And so I've been a tech entrepreneur my entire life, and really got tapped into this whole EV charging opportunity 3 years ago when the co-founder of ezVOLTz and myself got together to see how we could address the need that's out there for EV charging and approaching EV charging as though you were approaching a 24/7, 365 day a year. I come from the telecom industry. I've built systems for every major telecom in the world, and I'm used to 5 nines availability. And the average availability in the charger industry is 1 out of every 3 is not working at any given point. And here in Rehoboth, it's actually a lot worse with the ones you have. So thank you for having me here. It's an honor to try to help. So I'll give you a little bit of an overview of ezVOLTz. Let me introduce my team as well. Laura Everingham-Price. Laura is our head of strategic alliances at ezVOLTz, and has a background in the government area, but has been working with us here for the last few years. And then Sean Powell. Sean is our vice president of all public sector, and has also lots of experience in the government and transportation space. So they're both here. I'll turn it over to Laura to do the majority of the presentation. But if you don't mind, I'll just give you the overview of what we do, what we focus on, and then we'll talk about specifically what we can do for the town here, we think. So the ezVOLTz solution is a combination. We looked at the problem, and we made a combination of technologies. We're really a software and services company that addresses providing EV charging to municipalities. Probably 80% of our engagements are with cities, counties, towns, states, and also with commercial entities and enterprises as well. We make an offering that's a combination of a mobile app. You can download our app on any app store, the Apple app or the Google app. And it shows every charging station in the entire country. Allows you to navigate there, allows you to go, and allows you to charge and so forth at any station in the country. We also manage and install chargers for specific clientele, and that's what we really looked at to try to help the city of Rehoboth and working together with Henry. We also have a back-end management platform that allows us to look and try to provide the kind of visibility and uptime that gets you closer to the 99% as opposed to like maybe 50% that it is today. So, and then we have, we will work with third parties to install the best of breeds infrastructure to do the charging hardware piece itself. So at any rate, this is just the overview of our offering. The thing that's different in the bottom left, you'll see revenue sharing. The way the model works today for most charging solution vendors is they'll install the infrastructure, they'll manage it for you, and that's it. You have no visibility into it, and they keep most of the money. They keep, in fact, all of the money. And in some cases, they give you just enough to cover the electric. Our model's different. What we do is we manage it for you, and it's your infrastructure, and you get the majority of the revenue. So 80% of the revenue is yours. We provide it to you on a monthly basis, and therefore, our goal is to have the infrastructure pay for itself within a 12-month to 18-month period. We'll go through this in a bit with you. I'll turn it over to Laura here to go through more of the overview.
Good morning, Mayor and Commissioners. Thank you so much for having us here. And I have some memories just not too far away. When I was a little girl, we went to Dewey Beach. My grandparents took the entire family. There were 16 of us that stayed at this little tiny cottage in Dewey Beach. So happy to be here and nearby. So that's everything kind of is in the slide deck. But what I want to do is just go a little bit deeper. The statistic is changing a little bit, but it's still not good. It's about 1 in 5 chargers aren't working. And I think the reason it's changed from 1 in 3 to 1 in 5 is because so many new ones are getting installed. So when they are first installed, they work, but it doesn't take long for them not to be working. And if you're not watching them, as John mentioned, you know, a electrical company comes in, they pick a couple of chargers, they put them on the ground, and then they run away. And so you don't really know if they're working. And honestly, they're not going to do much in the management of the ones that aren't profitable. And as stewards of taxpayer dollars and making sure that you have any infrastructure you put in is accessible to all of the public and your tourists, that's kind of your job to make sure that you're putting in something that's going to be functional, because whether it's paid for with grant funds or whether your own right out of your pocket, taxpayers aren't going to be happy if they have seen you install something and it's not working. You know, it almost doesn't matter where the money came from, because grant funds are still taxpayer dollars, no matter what, whether it's your revenues or federal revenues. So unfortunately, they're just not really working very well. So the model is really cool because you own it. Yes, you front the money for it, but you're going to, as John mentioned, you're going to get 80% of the revenues, and I'll go a little bit more into detail with that. You get to choose the pricing. You can do, and I get into that with different groups. You could charge something different to your citizens than your tourists. We're going to pay back 80%. I mean, and that's significant. And we take care of everything for you, because while Henry is an amazing public works guy, he's got a lot to do and not necessarily an expert in the field. So to have somebody who's going to keep an eye on everything 24/7, 365, we're able to, if something goes a little funky with it, what's the first thing you do with your computer before you throw it across the room? You're going to reboot it, right? So we can, through our back office software, we can reboot the charger, which fixes a lot of problems. Sometimes you need to update your app, right? So we can send firmware updates remotely. All of this pre-diagnosis can be done before we ever get into having to deploy a tech. And when we are managing the chargers for you, you're almost like buying an insurance policy. You're not going to have to pay for the repair on it. You have a warranty for the first, 2 to 3 years. But if something goes wrong with it, let's say vandalism, and that's a thing. I don't know. Can anybody answer why someone might want to cut the cord of a charger? It's full of copper, and it's going for $4 or $5 a pound. So there is vandalism. There are cable management systems that can reduce that. And that's why we work with some various manufacturers that we feel are going to help with those types of things. And again, we write you a check at the end of the month. So John mentioned the app, and this is really cool. So not only does it show every charging charger in the entire country, what we can do for you is we white label that app. So it would be the Rehoboth Beach Navigation app powered by ezVOLTz. We can help you put little advertisements on there, little banner ads. If you've got a festival or something coming, you can offer discounts. So this is white labeled for you. That is included with what we offer is this app, and it's fully customizable for whatever you want to do. There's some really cool things you can do, but it shows everything. And when any chargers that are installed and running by you, you can start and stop and pay for that while there be a credit card payment on the charger itself. Through the app, you can register that credit card information, and then you know where your users are coming from. I think in your last presentation, you were talking about all the data that you can, I know what it was, it's your water and sewer stuff, right? And you know when they're using it and who's using it and all of that. Same thing here, you're gonna know who is using your app. Are they tourists? Are they locals? And that's very helpful with your tourism and economic development to have that data. So as we said, the revenue share, you get to choose what you want to charge for that. If the going rate is 50 cents a kilowatt, you can charge that to everybody. If you would rather incentivize your citizens and your taxpayers saying, you know what, they're paying enough, I'm gonna give them a break. If they drive an EV, then you can charge a different rate for them. You can give incentive pricing to Justice 40 areas, to veterans, whatever you want or not. And then if you ever get into any of your light-duty vehicles being EVs, obviously they can go anywhere and they don't have to pay like if they went to, you probably have a fuel farm for your fleet vehicles, and you don't have to pay like the Exxon prices. But same thing, they'd be able to use these charging stations, and it would only be the cost of electricity. There'd be no retail rate that any fleet vehicles, if that's in your plans in the future. And speaking of fleets, now we know that grants and things might not be as available as they were in the past, right? And there's still taxpayer dollars. But in this, so having the revenue share is incredibly important to pay for itself. But there is a fleet rebate program run by Delmarva Power, and it is for your make ready, and it is up to $45,000 per site. I believe they allow up to two sites. Two sites. So I know you were considering potentially over the time doing 4 sites, but I think we're starting with 1, so that you're going to see in the ROI slide how much that can come down, and you looks like you guys would definitely qualify for that. You just have to have plans for 5 EV fleets. I don't know if you have any yet, but good faith efforts moving towards that. That can significantly reduce the cost of your infrastructure. Okay, I'm a spreadsheet girl. So what we did was we did 1 site here at the convention center, and this would be very similar depending on where you might want to put it. So 2 level 2 dual ports, so that's 4, right? And 1 DC fast charger has 2 ports, so that's 6 ports, right? A level 2 is about 3 to 4 hours to get about an 80% charge. A DC fast charger will charge in about 20 minutes, right? So having a mix is nice. People that are coming to spend a few hours at a restaurant, shop, you want to bring them down here, you want to keep them here, right? Or go to the beach for a while, but if you want to draw traffic in, When you put up a DC fast charger, it's like eye candy. And that navigation app is gonna go, oh, wow, that's where I'm gonna go, right? My next door, the town next door does not have these, so they're going to come here. The cost of the hardware is about $60,000 to do that here. The electrical installation to go along with that is just under $54,000. So to do the full installation here at the convention center, and then these are just estimates, right? But we did have our electrical installer come out here to really, this is close, okay? This is not just pulling it out of thin air. And then the one-time costs about $115, and then for us to manage everything, all of the software, the management, the maintenance, the governance, the app, that's $13,000 annually. So all in year one, it's about $128,000. And I watched the last meeting, and it's like, how long will it take to pay for that? And you're going to be astounded that it is about 12 to 18 months. And the way that happens is in the orange that you see, the 80% share that the city would receive. This is based on 2 charges per day on the level 2 at $20 a pop, and 4 charges per day on the DC fast charger at $25 a pop. And you can get more because it only takes 20 minutes rather than 3 hours, right? Make sense? And so that would generate in the first year $105,000. And your installation cost was $114, right? We have taking the annual cost out. And so that return on investment, 13 months.
Mayor, may I ask a question about the, have you, thanks. Have you considered any seasonality to the usage of the chargers in a
Yes.
resort town?
Yes, what we did was we looked at what you get during the high season, and we cut that in half, right? So if you're getting 5 charges a day in the summertime for 5 months, we cut that in half to get a fair.
Let me add to that.
Sure.
Can you speak in the microphone?
We looked at, from talking with Henry and looking at what your rates have been using the 2 chargers that you have here. And during the summer, you're right. I mean, during the summer, you're getting 5 charges a day on average from the level 2s that you have, which is worldwide, it's about 2 that you would normally get in a good location. And you're getting 5 in the summer, right? In the off season, especially if they're not working like now, but in the off season, it's going to be a lot less. So we came up with an average of 2 per day, and that's a pretty solid when you factor in the 3 or 4 months where you're going to get a lot more than 2, and then the off shoulder seasons where you may get 1 per day if you're lucky. So
I think you're being optimistic just based on walking by those chargers in the City Hall parking lot and also observing the I think it's almost a dozen chargers on the highway just outside town, which are rarely used. Maybe 1 or 2 of the 12 are used in the summer. I'm not sure. I mean, I look at this presentation. I'm very concerned. We're in a situation where the city's budget has grown in just 4 years from 27.7 million to over 43 million. In fact, almost 44 million. That's a 58% increase in an era when, yes, we had inflation, which was almost 19.8% to be generous. So I just think, I'm not sure why we're considering investing in something.
I can address a couple of your concerns, if I may. Let me just finish one part of the orange part. If we factor in that $45,000, and that's a non-competitive grant, right, on the rebate program, that takes your cost down to under $70,000, and it pays for itself in 8 months. And again, we work very conservative with our estimate. Let me address 2 of your other points. These aren't working. I mean, I pull up the app now and it says it's unavailable. There's a Blink charging system nearby. The reason that you may see them not being used is because they're not functional, and we're going to make sure that they are because we're watching them 24/7. The other thing is the ones like at the Royal Farms, those are Tesla chargers. Only Teslas can charge there, and that's only about 30% of the market. So the other 70% of EV chargers, they can't go there. So if they're not being used, it's because they're not driving a Tesla. So, and we're happy to answer any additional questions on that, but we've done our homework for the last 3 years. We're taking on the averages and what we're seeing, and that statistic about 1 in 3 or 1 in 5 chargers is from, a federal statistic, and that's what we found. Every place we go, that's exactly what they're saying to us. The market's consolidating. Manufacturers are going out of business. They aren't going to manage the ones that aren't as profitable, and you don't get any of the data to understand it, if that helps a little bit.
I guess because I think that the EV market has been stagnant in recent years, unfortunately, for better or worse. People have different opinions on the value.
The statistic
of it.
is it is
I'm
going
worried
up.
we're making an investment in a market which right now is stagnant, and you're guaranteed that these are going to function long term, whereas the existing ones didn't. I'm concerned.
That's on our shoulders. If they're not functioning, then we have to take care of it. You do not have to put extra outlay in, because that's part of our management services, is that we make sure that we're getting somebody out there to take care of them if that happens.
If you made the 100% of the investment, I would believe all your statements. But because you're asking the city to put up almost $70,000, I'm worried.
My understanding is that this is already put in the budget, so it's up for discussion when we get to the budget session. Today's presentation is courtesy of these folks to give us a better understanding of what this system is. So I'd prefer to do the debating during the budget meeting, if you don't mind, but Commissioner Saunders?
My question was, have you considered going to the private sector and putting these in? For instance, we have a number of hotels. I'm sure we have private parking lots in the city. We have theaters. I would think that we don't sell gas. Why would we sell electric, in other words?
Well, it is a benefit for your citizens, and let me give you an example. In my government background, I remember pre-COVID and broadband, right? And in the county where I live, we had like 90%. That sounded great. We have 90% broadband coverage. And then COVID hit, right? And there's a lot more remote jobs anyway, but then our kids, right? How are they going to study? And it came down to that it is the government entity that needs to get it out so that it's accessible for everyone. And whether there are EV mandates or not coming down from the federal or the state governments, it is growing, definitely a growing market. We wouldn't be in the business if it wasn't. And it's kind of what comes first, the chicken or the egg. And we've noticed this when when people are considering putting in EV fleets in their government cities or their counties. It's like, but the infrastructure's not there. Plus, you wouldn't want to go out and pay retail 50 cents a kilowatt when your cost of your electricity is probably 2, 3, 4, 5 cents, right? That doesn't make sense. But if the infrastructure's not there, then do you buy the fleet car? Do you buy the fleet car before that's there? In Maryland, where we live, the state put a mandate down that, was it 30%? 25% of all new state vehicles had to be EVs, but there was no infrastructure there. So it's definitely a challenge, but it's one that the governments, there's a certain responsibility that goes with the government to get infrastructure on the ground. And I think the broadband example is a good, yep, sure.
If I may, I wanted to address your question about the private sector versus the public sector. And for the record, I'm Sean Powell, Vice President with ezVOLTz. Thank you all for having us here. Your question, Madam Commissioner, was about going to the private sector and looking. One of the advantages of having charging stations city-owned is that they're twofold. One, you can use your fleet. As you grow your fleet out, you can use your fleet to charge at those charging stations, and also you can gather revenue from citizens or visitors using it, and it's a really good dual function you don't have to worry about. And if it pays for itself, everything's there. You don't have to worry about locking everything. People come find it. So does that make sense?
Well, we have some, I think 1 or 2 EV vehicles that, for the boardwalk trash collection, and we have chargers for them over at the streets department. I mean, I think we're looking for a solution to a problem, again, that really doesn't exist. And furthermore, Delaware opted not to adopt some draconian EV mandates. You're giving your experience in Maryland. let's face facts, between the rare earth minerals that exploit children and other aspects, not everybody's on board for this transition to EV. The upfront costs of buying an EV are always substantially higher than, combustion engine cars. So I don't know. I feel that we have a constrained budget, and that will come up this afternoon. But I'm hearing a lot of what you're saying, and we're taking on all the risk in my view, and you're getting this $12,000 to $13,000 or $13,000 cash flow from us directly for managing the software. This does not sound appealing to me from a financial perspective.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. We can't settle your debate on the issue here today. That's between your group up here. But we're here to present potential solutions with not only the fleet, but I know that fleets are coming to a lot of locations. So if you are going to build out your fleet, in order to get this fleet rebate, you do not have to have a fleet. You just need to have plans for a fleet in the future. And that's pretty simple. And also, if you plan on going to a fleet, electric vehicle fleet, Delmarva Power for $2,500, which will be rebated to you, will help you plan out your fleet plans, which would more than likely include all of your vehicles and all that kind of stuff. So that's also available. Now, back to your comment about you don't see many cars charging at like the Royal Farms or whatever's outside of town here. Well, Laura hit on it. They can only accept Tesla cars. However, in most cases, Tesla vehicles have been issued an adapter to where they can charge elsewhere. So you would not only capture you'd be able to capture some of the Tesla people. I believe John talked about, coming in town, parking, or may have been Laura parking. These are perfect locations for people to stop for a couple hours, fill up, so to speak, recharge their electric vehicle, wander around town and hit many of your shops and everything here. So that's the whole economic development thing that we're looking at here as well. So.
Well, I guess my reservations are that if this were as profitable as you're alleging, your business model would not be to ask the taxpayers to make this investment. You wouldn't need to. So I'm just not convinced that the finances are there, especially given the fairly lackluster environment for EV sales, and that Delaware has no mandate. And maybe Mr. Tedder can correct me. I believe we have too little EV. Aren't even close to a fleet of 5 vehicles. And you mentioned a $2,500 incentive to buy these EV vehicles. Are so much more expensive than conventional vehicles. Are we buying more EV vehicles?
I'm sorry, you misunderstood what I said. It's to plan your EV fleet, $2,500, okay? And I do know that you have a street sweeper on the way for the boardwalk, which is pretty cool. We watched it last week or 2 weeks ago, whenever it was.
Yeah, it's the two. And then, of course, under our enterprise fleet leasing system, we could move to EVs, but we don't have any plans.
We're just trying to prepare you for the future on that, if that's a way that you want to go.
This might be premature because this is an investment that I don't think we have the money, to afford at the moment, and we aren't committed to more EV vehicles at the moment either. We're not close to this 5. And making a plan to present to some governmental agency and getting $2,500 is such a minor amount of money, it shouldn't change anything.
And I thank you for that feedback. We do appreciate that. It's up to you all to make this decision, not us. So thank you.
Before I go to the public, do you have anything more in your presentation?
I would just want to emphasize that, whether you use the fleet rebate program or not, it's about a 13-month payback. What happens after year 1? The revenue is about $100,000 a year, and I can certainly appreciate the budget struggles. So here's something that's about $100,000 a year and will probably grow as you increase more sites, that is going to help supplement your budget, help fill potholes, help, whatever you need to put in, help shore up your dock, whatever that takes, that it's an additional revenue stream. Local governments have very little in the way of revenue stream. Income tax, property tax, that's pretty much about it. Maybe you have some accommodations taxes for your hotels and such. It's tough. It's tough to come by. So if there's something that is very little risk, and after year 1 you're making $100,000 plus per site, that's kind of an easy decision in my mind.
Mayor, if I could, please. Let Bunky go. He was Who's before me?
Commissioner Markert?
I think I'm speaking as the sole EV owner here on the panel. The only thing, I mean, thank you for your presentation. The issue with having an EV, especially a non-Tesla EV, is what I have, and obviously there are more non-Teslas than Teslas. I own a Ford, and Ford recently provided all its Ford owners with an adapter that I can now use a Tesla charger. And the Tesla, I would just say from my experience that it's hard if you don't have a Tesla. Up till now, it's been relatively hard to find the high level chargers. You have to go to a level 2. Level 2 is there's a level 1, and don't even think about a level 1. You know,
That's
like,
what you're going to put at home. That you're going to charge overnight is the level
but
1. Yeah.
Really, level 2 is what you want baseline, and then you want the high speed chargers. And the advantage of this, and this is where I think our head ought to be on this is an amenity to have and especially in our community and our market and the people who come here and the income levels of the people who come here and the people who want to come here not to eat chicken at Rofo, but want to come to a restaurant in our town, whether it's in season or out of season, is a wonderful amenity to have. And I think this is the decision to be made is, do we want to promote that and maybe make some money on it? Much like we have parking and we provide parking during the season, and not the fact that you could come here on the off season and park your car and have a meal or shop or go lay on the beach or whatever and charge your car at the same time, that is a huge amenity, because you're always you're always looking for where you can charge. There's a rule of charging. It's the ABCs. Always be charging. Okay, you don't want to. You always want to know you're not going to get stuck someplace. You know what I mean? And the fact that, let's go to Rehoboth this weekend. We can go there, have a meal, and we could charge our car, and then get home. That's like kind of what you do. Because right now, if you go out and like want to take a trip somewhere, and there's plenty of YouTube videos, if you ever want to look at them, of people who do this, and it's like the Wild Wild West. You get there and you don't know that the charger's going to work and all this other kind of stuff. But the good news is this has just sort of blossomed with regard to making the Tesla chargers available. I'm not too keen on the car or the guy who markets them, but he have a really good charging network. So that's what I think these guys are offering here, and I think we ought to think about it in terms of the future. And then unfortunately, it's very difficult to project on the future when we have a new federal administration that is like trying to basically do away with it. But there are still a lot of people out there that are supportive of EVs. I think it's the way to go. If you ever drive one, you'll understand it perfectly. So that I just want to temper our thoughts about it.
Thank you, John.
Mayor, if I could, please.
John, do you want to respond?
I just wanted to echo what he said. I mean, you basically just succinctly said it. And today, 20% of all vehicles on the road are either EVs or hybrids able to charge, and that's expected to double in just the next few years. I could share the statistics with you. So,
Mayor, if I could, please.
There?
Yeah, so a few questions on your cost and ROI estimate. So the amounts you're putting in the total revenue per year, you've got 2 per day at $20, 4 per day at $25. Your assumption around the $20 or $25, is that the market price for here in coastal Delaware?
Yeah, it's a conservative market price based on what a standard rate would be. For level 2, it's like 35 cents a kilowatt, and level 3, it's I think 50 cents a kilowatt. And,
Okay.
and it's a lot more at a lot of places. So
Okay. Which was going to lead to my next question, which is, it sounds like there is market pricing here. So that number could move up or down
Sure.
depending on
Yeah.
who else may or may not.
And it gives you the benefit also for your residents to offer it significantly less using our model. I mean, we have the ability to charge the public one rate and your residents another rate, and then your employees another rate, or whatever. So
Okay. So, which leads to the next question. Is this 20 or 25? If I was to go to, where's your where's your closest ezVOLTz from where we're sitting right now or standing?
closest ezVOLTz.
Yeah, so where's your closest,
deployed
deployed ezVOLTz to here?
It's not in Delaware. It's
Okay.
all of our
And,
customers.
and what are they charging? So the one that would be closest to us?
What we were going to do is, we can still do this as using our mobile app. We can tell you what everybody's charging kind of in the whole region here. And before we recommend what you should charge, we'll do that. We'll do a market study that says, here's what they're charging, at the Royal Farms. Here's what they're charging here, just so you can have a view.
Yeah,
I haven't done that yet.
So I think, as the mayor said, we're not making a decision on this today. This is informational for us.
Okay.
So,
Yeah, I could do that for you.
Without whether, don't interpret any of my questions as to whether I am for this or against this.
No,
I'm
it's
trying to
a great-
validate. I want to make sure
Very much,
that
yeah.
your analysis is accurate.
Great.
Okay. So, yeah, if you could provide
Sure.
what others are
I
charging elsewhere.
definitely-
The other thing I'd like to understand is what are the trends, right? Or what are the expected trends for, it's going to be 20, is it going to be 19?
It's great.
And you can just,
I,
you can
I
just
do have a lot of that data.
provide that information
I
here
can
because,
get that to you.
sure. I think we do need to be concerned. We do have a new administration down in Washington,
Yes,
and
I know this.
they're anti-EV.
Yes.
So, I don't think it's unreasonable to assume that there will be a slowdown in the sales of EVs. I mean, and again, I'm talking about assumptions
Sure.
here. This isn't. I'm not putting this out for debate. I'm just saying it's not unreasonable to assume that there could be a slowdown in EVs. I know you don't disagree with that. I'm just making the comment.
Yeah, it's a great comment.
Because
It's
then they
valid.
were making an investment here, right? If we do this, we're
It's
making an
definitely
investment.
valid.
And we're predicating this investment on that we are going to make money in the future.
Sure.
So I need to test the assumptions and feel comfortable that we're going to make money in the future. Which leads to what I hope is my final question, which is, okay, $13,000 in annual recurring costs. Everything has a life expectancy. So when this needs to be replaced, I'm assuming that's, let me finish, two couple of questions in here. I'm assuming that the replacement is not part of the annual recurring cost. We would have to pay to replace it. That's one. Two, and one of these, two would be, I'm assuming the maintenance, management, and government fee is going to go up every year based on some percentage, okay? Whether it's cost of living or something else, okay? So that'd be two. The third thing, and I can't remember what the third question was. So if you can provide that information, right? And probably just need to see the contract, right? So
Yeah.
I'm sure in the
I can
contract there's
definitely-
exclusions. I mean, if there's
Yeah, we'll
vandalism,
provide
there's
that
probably
for you,
exclusions
just
around
through all that, yep.
vandalism. So again, we got to, I think
Great.
there are a lot of good questions being answered, but we got to go in this
Sure.
with our eyes
Happy
wide
to-
open.
Totally.
We've been presented with an ROI that looks, really appealing of in year two, we're going to get $91,000, but we need to validate that.
Yeah,
So if you
great.
can provide what you're charging elsewhere,
Mhm.
okay? Who pays when this what is the life expectancy of one of these units, okay?
Yep.
When the life expectancy is up and it has to be replaced, who pays to replace it? I'm assuming that's us.
not writing any
And
of
then
this down.
three, the maintenance management,
on
and
the
government
video? Okay.
costs. Just want to see, I want to see the contract around
Sure,
that.
sure. We can
Okay,
provide you
so
that.
I can see what the annual increases are and whatever, any exclusions that there would be from that.
Great.
Because again, I'm guessing that vandalism would probably be excluded. But again, let's see the contract.
Yep.
Great, so send the contract. If it's not excluded, great, we'll see it in the contract. Thank you, Mayor. I'm not sure if I missed anything, so.
Very good.
Thank you. Anybody
Very-
else up
very
here before
valid.
I go to the public?
Mayor, if I-
Commissioner Gossett?
Thank you, yes. Thanks for the presentation. A couple questions. How many customers do you currently have nationwide or are in this agreement?
We actually don't publicly publish that, but our team has It depends on how you look at it.
Well, let's look at it this
Hundreds
way.
or
Do you-
thousands.
Do you have any similar parallels of investing in a resort municipality, a partnership with that type of setup?
Like Rehoboth, you mean?
Like Rehoboth.
Exactly. We're in contract negotiations with several. We have we want to contract the National Association of State Procurement Officials, NASPO, and yeah, she can speak on it. But we've got 100 different municipal engagements.
And the other question, your Easy Connect software, is that proprietary to your
Yes.
establishments only?
Yes, the navigation app and the back office software, we own it, it's proprietary. We are network agnostic so that we can connect to any charger, whether it's your legacy chargers that you already have in place or any new chargers you would install. And while on the NASPO contract, I'm not going to go into detail, but what I will tell you is that there's a national need for this, and the NASPO is National Association of State Procurement Officials. There's a very highly competitive bid process for having the ability to do business in every state in the country, every local jurisdiction in the country, and we were one of just a small handful that won, and that gives you that government transparency to know that it's already been nationally vetted on its need and the pricing that we're offering.
And back to the app question again. So as I understand it, there are charging stations with a number of hotels around here. Those would not appear on your app? They all do.
They do.
Will appear.
And as a matter of fact, the Blink ones are down at some nearby location as well. I checked the app before I came in here.
Okay, great. And any, I guess you haven't had time to react to it yet, but one of the most recent executive orders was Unleashing America's Energy, which is, curtailing green energy mandates and funding and everything. Have you had any time to react to that, or how would this impact our relationship?
All I would say is that if you don't get, as much grant funding isn't available as it used to be in the past, the bipartisan infrastructure law or the CFI grants you get, that revenue share to help pay for any infrastructure that you do want is a critical component.
Yeah, and very, very little of our engagements are grant related.
Got it. Thank you.
Mayor,
That's all I have.
May I ask a question about that?
Commissioner Good?
So you're saying if very few of your installations are grant related, you're implying we'll get a $45,000 Delmarva rebate.
The grant is a little different than the Delmarva rebate.
That's on buying electricity in bulk. Is that the rebate you're looking toward?
Utility. That's from Delmarva Power. They're incenting their customer base to migrate to their vehicles so that they can sell more electricity. So.
I'm worried that might be pulled by the new administration. And by the way, just for the record, I have nothing against EVs. In fact, one of my sons has driven a Tesla since 2020. And, he doesn't happen to drive that many miles, but, I don't have a problem with EVs. I just have a problem with, I'm not sure that there's a major need for this in this town now. The tourists who do have non-Tesla EVs now have this option of this, this adapter. They can now use all those underutilized Tesla, charging stations right outside town, and then there are options in town. So I'm worried we're creating, more infrastructure that is not necessarily the highest priority for the average resident or visitor.
I would just say consider the economic development of your businesses, right? You can send them out of town to go to the Royal Farms and whatever, but you're going to draw people here, right, that might not normally come to Rehoboth. And then all of your restaurants, all of your businesses, everything that's here, they're going to stay and spend money here. So not only is there a revenue share for you, but all of your businesses are going to thrive, and all of those people hire employees, and they all pay taxes into your tax base. So from an economic development and tourism perspective, strategically locating them in your downtown areas, which benefits your budget and also the businesses who do business here
Well,
in
I
Rehoboth.
understand what you're saying. However, I've observed the functioning EV stations we have, and they are not utilized all that highly even in July. Like one of the two, adjacent to each other might have a Tesla or a non-Tesla EV in it. So
Right.
I'm worried. We're assuming there's a problem, and I'm not sure there's a problem currently in this town with EV charging capacity.
All right, thank you.
And Mayor, if I may, I did just want to clarify something about the Tesla chargers on Route 1. So anyone with an adapter with a non-Tesla EV like Ford, Kia, Hyundai, Rivian, they can only use a V3 charger from Tesla, and most of those on the highway are V2 chargers, an older version. So the only one that non-Teslas can use on Route 1 is actually at the Wawa, just when you turn to come into town, Rehoboth Avenue. So.
And DC fast chargers are utilized at a much higher rate because, yeah, you bring them down level 2s and shop and dine, that's fine, but people are looking for the 20-minute hit, right? They come, they charge, they go, and it is seriously like eye candy. If there's one of those that's on the app that draws them right down downtown Rehoboth, oh my goodness. If you build it, they will come.
Does anybody, before I go to the public, Tom, does anybody want a quick demonstration of their app?
Me to lose on my
No,
thumb.
not really.
No?
Yeah.
You're okay?
I'm good.
You're
I have
okay?
a follow-up question, though, if we may.
Go ahead, Tom.
Tom Gaynor, property owner. I'd be cautious because you guys sound like you did a great presentation, but you're signing checks that you can't cash. The number of EV in the United States, the adoption level is not 20%. It's nowhere near 20%. In Pennsylvania, it's 6%. In Maryland, it's like 9%. In Delaware, it's like 8%. And in DC, which is filled with chock full of government mandates, it's only 19%. So you get your facts right in your sales pitch because you're asking them who already have no credibility with the people of Rehoboth in spending our money to spend more money on an amenity. And if you're going to talk about amenities, Mr. Commissioner, why don't you just give out free apps at the restaurant? I mean, that is the mindset that is so toxic to the way that you approach the budgeting system. You're thinking about taking borrowed money. You made a mess of the budget last year. You increased our property taxes by 30% on erroneous data. You still haven't reversed that. You still haven't given us our tax money back. You've increased every fee possible under your purview with, again, faulty data. You guys haven't demonstrated basic financial competence or management ability. And if this is what you're building on an increased baseline of budgets, which explains the $10 million increase in the last 18 months in tiny town USA that has 1,600 voters for a $43 million budget, which is $56,000 per head for the 800 local voters. How you guys sit up there and are not mortified, embarrassed, and filled with hubris, filled with humility on the questions that are going to face you at 2 o'clock is beyond me. But your comment about it's an amenity, I thought was stunning because it probably epitomizes the way that you guys approach other people's money. We should just give it away like candy. Well, for God's sake, then I guess incentivize Salt Air to give out free appetizers. Incentivize, and we'll pay for it. And that'll bring more people in. And you'll get higher checks. And there's not a single gas station in town. So we're gonna incentivize the upper middle class, the 150 people who drive in an EV or whatever the number is, who pay the premium to buy the luxury car, to then sit, if it's such a good deal, go get the private sector restaurants and hotels to bankroll it. It's not for the people of this city to spend. And you guys have got to start taking better responsibility for what you were sent here to do. You have a fiduciary duty. Live up to it, hopefully.
Thank you, Tom. Walter? Nope. All right, I think that's it. We've got some homework to do, and there'll be some more discussion and debate at, I don't know, is that at this afternoon's meeting?
It's in the CIP, but of course, anytime.
So sometime. So with that, we'll draw to a close. And John and Laura and Sean, we thank you for your time, and I'm sure Taylor will be back in touch with you.
Thank you so much.
For sure. With that, we're going to go now to old business. A, discuss development of city's fund balance and net position policy.
Thank you, Mayor. Good afternoon. Good morning still. Mayor, commissioners, and members of the public. Before you and included in the agenda is another agenda item report related to the development of the city's fund balance and net position policy. Just wanted to briefly recap some of the items that we had discussed at the last meeting and some of the changes. So previously, when this policy was discussed, specifically as it relates to the net position in the wastewater fund, and I'll zoom in just so everybody can see it in case you don't have it handy. I won't go through the policy. I've presented it several times. There aren't any significant changes to the framework within the policy, but I do want to mention some of the changes that were made specifically as it relates to net position in the wastewater fund. So again, the policy really focuses to, at least for the water fund and the general fund, to fund 30% of operating expenses, 100% of debt service, 100% of CIP, and then also set aside funding for natural disasters. At the last meeting, there were some points made and great points about the agreement that we have with Sussex County related to cost-sharing arrangements. So with that taken into consideration and some of the comments at the last meeting, we have factored in, as it relates to the net position for wastewater, only 58% of the FY25 budgeted debt service for the principal and interest on the Alpha-on plant upgrade. So again, previously in a prior draft, we funded 100% of that, but knowing that we will receive 42% from the county, we've adjusted that portion respectively. Also, just another point I wanted to make is at the last meeting I had discussed that I had planned a meeting with GHD to talk about natural disaster funding, specifically as it relates to the water and wastewater net position. Right now, we have earmarked $2 million in natural disaster funds for the water fund and $2 million for the wastewater fund. Really, my goal was to work collaboratively with GHD to provide more of a risk assessment as it relates to those two funds. Henry and I had 2 meetings with GHD. The first meeting was to really go over the fund balance net position policy with them and explain it to them. And then we had a follow-up meeting thereafter to talk specifically about the $2 million. We wanted to engage with GHD because they actually conduct similar risk assessments. I think they're currently conducting one. They're also doing some work down in North Carolina as a result of some of the natural disasters that have occurred down there. So we had talked a little bit about the $2 million. They were comfortable at $2 million, but really they didn't want to opine any further on whether they thought $2 million was significant enough or was sufficient enough without doing a proper study. I had asked them whether or not they thought some type of risk assessment could be done prior to the end of this fiscal year, knowing that we've talked about this policy for going on a year now. And I think we're all anxious to wrap this policy up soon. And they indicated that to do the proper risk assessment, they don't think they'd be able to complete that scope by the end of the fiscal year. So again, we did have some conversations with them about the $2 million. They thought $2 million was a good number. They're happy to at least see that we are developing a fund balance policy, that we're setting aside natural disaster funds. Preliminarily, they said one of the biggest, I think, threats that we have at the wastewater treatment plant is any of the exposed infrastructure, so the storage tanks, things like that. But then again, based on their work that they're doing in North Carolina, they saw that there certainly is some threat to infrastructure that's underground as well. So they would want to look at that. We briefly talked to them about maybe lumping into some type of risk assessment, an analysis of best management practices that we could deploy ahead of a potential natural disaster. One idea that they threw out was, if we are anticipating high gusts of winds or just significant winds as part of a storm, ensuring that our water tanks are full. to help protect that infrastructure. So a lot of really good ideas that they threw out there, but again, we weren't able to engage with them to do a full-blown risk assessment. So that is something certainly I think I'm personally interested in doing with them, just to be able to firm up that number a little bit more. But again, we didn't want to delay the policy, hopefully adoption of this policy, with that project on hold. Again, this policy is one that would get looked at every single year as we prepare the upcoming fiscal year budget, but then also as we have our annual audit to be able to define what the total net position and fund balance is as of the end of that audit. And then one of the things just briefly that I did not touch on was if we were to do some type of risk assessment with GHD, I'd want to identify some of the specific risks that are called out in the hazard mitigation plan that we adopted through Sussex County. They include flooding, heavy winds and coastal storms, winter storms, and then extreme cold and heat. So those are some of the natural disasters that we would look at to kind of identify how that impacts, if at all, some of our infrastructure. Briefly, at the last meeting, I did touch a little bit about grants and loans. Primarily as it relates to natural disasters, the grant that would be available to us is through FEMA, and that's the Public Assistance Grant. It is the largest grant program that FEMA offers related to federally declared disasters, but I want to put emphasis on federally declared disasters. A lot of cases when a natural disaster occurs, funding from sometimes from the state, but certainly from the federal government will not become available unless it is declared an emergency. And I talked briefly about this last time, and really what that requires is, we have to wait for a declaration, but certainly there's going to be costs incurred by us to start recovery efforts. And so there will be a cost to the city, even if those funds do come through in the future through reimbursements, or if we are applying for a loan or something like that. There are a number of non-emergency disaster assistance. So these are assistance programs that are out there to help us plan for natural disasters so that we can be more resilient. And they revolve around, flood mitigation. Also, there's the BRIC program. I thought one of the interesting priorities for them in FY23 was increased funding for the adoption and enforcement of the latest published editions of building codes. I hadn't known that previously, so I thought that was really interesting. And then a lot of, like I said, really pre-disaster mitigation programs. Now that we have adopted the county all-hazard mitigation plan, that certainly sets us up for some of these federal programs. But I am actually in the process right now of working with the Sussex County Emergency Operations Center to kind of better define some of these programs that are out there, eligibility criteria, programs that they offer and how we can take advantage of them. Through the years, I've also participated in a number of grant workshops, just, kind of informing local governments about what's out there, but more so the process to obtaining those funds. So documentation is a big thing. And so we're working to kind of put together sort of like a fact sheet or just more information on what programs are out there. But again, for the most part, what I have seen is a lot of the non-emergency disaster assistance, so the work that can be done ahead of time to prepare for these natural disasters. So I think that's everything I really wanted to touch on. I mean, I think one of my goals, if the commissioners were ready, would be to bring this policy forward at the regular meeting for consideration, possibly a vote. Keeping in mind that I would like to further explore the risk assessment with GHD for the natural disaster funding. I do not have a scope for that work, so I don't have anything prepared to really present. Certainly, we can present that at a future meeting, but I just wanted to close the loop on the natural disaster piece and let you know that that is currently where we stand. So with that, I'll take any questions you might have.
Mayor, if I could, please.
There.
Okay, so from my perspective, don't even bother getting an estimate from GHD.
Okay.
I have zero interest in pursuing any risk assessment with GHD. What I'd suggest you do first is get in touch with some municipalities down in Florida, Texas Gulf area. I mean, as we've discussed in the past, our biggest risk here would be a major hurricane that comes in early August, right? That would impact probably half of our tourism revenue, maybe a little bit less, so somewhere between $7 and $8 million. If you contact these municipalities, I'm sure they have policies and procedures that are already in place to protect their infrastructure. And when I use the term infrastructure, I'm talking water, wastewater, you name it. You know, my understanding is that in advance of major hurricanes, they'll just shut down the water system. So I don't think we need to reinvent the wheel with GHD here. I think we can go to other municipalities that have policies and procedures in place and things that are proven, and let's use what they have. Once we have that, if there's a need to, you know, add that or expand that, there's some good reason to engage with a consulting firm to round that out. Okay, I'm open to hearing that, but I just don't see a need to spend any money on that. Sticking to, you know, again, our biggest risk is a major hurricane. If there is a major hurricane here, you know, there will be an emergency declaration, so FEMA funds will be available. So I think to take the position that, you know, that might not happen, I think is the bad position to take. We're talking about millions of, you know, setting aside millions of dollars here, right? I'm not even sure 9 million is enough, okay? Just based on the number I just gave, which is if we get hit by a major hurricane in early August, we're gonna lose at least $7 million in revenue. So there's your 70 or 9 million. And the idea that we're gonna cut costs, right? We're setting aside 30% of our operating budget. Come on, we're going to actually have more expenses because we'll have additional public safety expenses. We'll likely have significant overtime because we'll need, you know, our police to be patrolling the streets, probably shutting down the city. We'll have significant cleanup expenses related to, you know, streets. And again, we'd look to get all of that reimbursed by FEMA. So my concern is I'm not opposed to, you know, putting this forward, you know, at the next meeting, just to move it forward. But there's significant work that needs to be done on this because I don't think 9 million is enough. And I think the idea that, you know, just setting aside 30% of operating expenses, you know, is going to hold us over. I just don't believe that's the case. So I think there's a lot of work to be done here. I think we need to, you know, detail out what that 9 million would be spent on. I think we probably need to be realistic in terms of, you know, what our operating expenses would be, realistic in terms of what the potential lost revenue would be, and including in there how we get reimbursed, you know, how we get reimbursed for a lot of this, right? I mean, if there would be an emergency declaration, which there would in our worst case scenario, we'll end up getting a lot of money back. Sure, we may have to front it, right? We may have to put the money up front, but, you know, fortunately, you know, we've got a pretty hefty cash balance, so.
I agree. I think I would rather see more money in there. And if you recall, the very first presentation had, I think, 60%. And I was amenable, and since we had that in there, I was amenable at that time to leave it alone. And that's where I'm still at with it. Anybody else?
I have a question.
Commissioner Markert?
Yeah. I am still looking at this with and believe me, this is, I think this, what you've done on this, I think is superb, and you're making it better and all that kind of stuff. And I think this is definitely long overdue, and having it codified in the way that you're approaching it and everything. But the main issue with this is, I hark back to my discussions with former Commissioner Sharp, you know, trying to go through the whole budget aspect of this. But really, I think ultimately what we want to come up with is a number. In this representation, it looks like it's, you know, 2.5, yeah, or 2 million, let's say $2 million. Okay, which is just a number that we would have sort of access to, to sort of average out the budget that we're proposing, right? It doesn't mean we're going to spend it. It doesn't mean, all it does is allow us to balance our budget somehow. I mean, that's the ultimate exercise that we're going through in order to do that. And I just want to ask, when was the last time you ran a deficit? Have you? You know, you know, but it's not normal, right? I mean, because obviously when revenues are down, you spend less. You know, you're looking at the number as you go. You know, so for us to go to sort of like what I consider the agony of last year was that we had to do these things that were politically sensitive and irritated a lot of people and all that kind of stuff. But that didn't and obviously they got charged that stuff. We did increase the parking rates. We did increase the thing. But, you know, we may not have had to do that if we had this, I'm thinking, right? That we would be able to somehow have the feasibility once we decide on this and, you know, approve whatever we're approving, that we can do this with this money at our disposal. I think,
yeah.
you know, and so that's sort of what my desire and hope is. You know.
Yeah, really, you know, the intent behind the policy is to have a policy in place to really say, you know, what does the city want to set aside for in the event of, again, a terrible summer season or a natural disaster. And so really it's just another tool that we can keep in our toolbox to kind of provide a little bit more transparency as it relates to the budget and future planning. You know, part of the reason why there have been surpluses every year is because we tend to budget conservatively because we never know what could happen. Transfer tax could come in less, you know, so we try to forecast those things, but do it, you know, conservatively. The other thing is, as you mentioned, you know, one of the things we did during COVID was just happened to be timing was ahead of the summer season. You know, COVID hit us pretty hard, and so we anticipated a decline in visitorship and revenues. And so we were able to take a hard look at the capital improvement plan and really identify some of those projects that we could defer until after the summer to see, you know, what those revenues looked like. I think the smart thing to do is what we've done in this policy, and that's to fund 100% of the CIP because, you know, as you'll see, the CIP has grown, but a lot of the projects, I think we could argue are critical projects, you know, upgrades to the wastewater treatment plant, upgrades to the water facility where you have PFAS and, you know, that mitigation coming down the line. So we're adding more to the CIP, but it's a lot of critical infrastructure projects. And so I would never want to see the city in a position where we have to delay or defer or cancel entirely any of those critical projects. And so setting aside 100%, again, make sure that, you know, we have the funds available to continue with those projects.
Mayor, if I could please, if Mr. Mark's done. So I don't agree on the CIP, and the reason why I don't agree on funding 100% of CIP, though this is, you know, if you want to put 100% in there, that's fine. Because again, back to if we have a catastrophic hurricane here, those projects are going to stop dead, okay? They're going to be like zero priority. Some of them may eventually restart, okay? But some may just get canceled and never happen. But again, you know, if you want to put 100% in there, you know, put 100% in there.
And, you know, we've talked a little bit about that in previous meetings, and I think the challenge is, you know, certainly what we could do every year is take a look at the CIP and kind of reprioritize those projects. I mean, if we're going to say that none of the projects proceed, that could be a decision that's made, but it's really hard to put a percentage because every year the CIP is going to change, the priority of those projects are going to change, the projects themselves are going to change. So, you know, I think it's coupled with the fact that we want to set aside funds to do those capital projects, but also knowing that we have the flexibility to delay or just cancel some of those in entirety.
Mayor?
Anybody else? Commissioner Good?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Miller. Yeah, I'm glad that you're showing, you know, some attempt to be a little more conservative. And I've been concerned for a long time that, you know, we just added $5.5 million to our to the city's debt. So we're approaching that 75 million debt limit that, you know, whatever the bond markets or whatever have decided is appropriate for us. But if you look at the amount of debt we're carrying per property owner, it's staggering. So I think at this point, even patting ourselves on the back that we've had balanced budgets, those have often been because we've taken on more debt, including the $5.5 million we just took on. So, yeah, I'd like to be really conservative. I think given the small size of our town, we're carrying too much debt. So we can't afford to borrow in the case of a catastrophe awaiting FEMA funds. So, yeah, it's good that we have this cushion. I appreciate it. And I'm a little unclear, are you saying GHD is offering to provide consulting services to present like a more formal plan?
Correct. So we actually approached them because they had done a water and wastewater facilities plan for us. And in that plan, they actually reference risk assessments and conducting risk assessments. So we approached them to see if they could elaborate more on what they offer in that space. They've obviously worked on a lot of the major capital projects related to the treatment plant, so they're intimately familiar with our infrastructure. So we had simply just approached them to see if it was something that they not only had experience with doing, but if they could offer any insights about specifically, you know, are you comfortable at 2 million, knowing what you know about the city, knowing what you know about the infrastructure, but also knowing, you know, some of the other projects that they're working on. Again, so we had sort of approached them as just sort of a first blush at who might be able to help us with some type of risk assessment.
Well, we're not here, like what price tag or what have they said they would charge us to do this additional assessment? Yeah, I'm aware GHD has been our main consultant on the wastewater treatment plant for many years. What's the price they want for this service?
Sure. Again, we didn't go as far as drafting a scope of work just yet. So again, we wanted to at least mention it to the board before we proceeded with doing anything like that.
Yeah, I think I would proceed with caution on that because, I mean, a hurricane that floods the way, you know, we had that minor flood on, I think it was October 30th or 31st of 2021 because of we had 30 hours of continuous rain. But I mean, it can happen. I'm not sure what value having them assess this for us would be. We're all aware we just have to have these reserves, you know, in case of a hurricane, which is the most likely risk, I guess, or potentially another pandemic, I guess, in terms of, you know, losing all our parking revenue for a season. Sure. But I know I was disappointed that Mr. Cheddar did not come to us before hiring Beacon for that $17,000 study of the dock before we decided whether, you know, whether it's worth pouring more money into that dock at this point. And I don't want to go to GH. Is anyone else reluctant to have GHD do this scope of work for us?
Well, I think already the Commissioner Thayer addressed that.
Yeah, I was glad to hear that. I mean,
Evan did mention that we are not moving forward on that.
okay, that's the decision is final. We're going to put that on pause for a while, or indefinite on we're going to mothball that, I hope, for a while.
Certainly from what I've heard, I think today, again, I only proposed that in the event that we wanted to do a little bit more analysis of the 2 million in water and wastewater. But, you know, I think I've heard today that there's no desire to do that. So, you know,
Great.
perfectly fine.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Yeah, so just, Mayor, if I could, please.
Commissioners there?
Yeah, so just kind of a clarification. I mean, I think we need to have policies and procedures in place in the event of, you know, a catastrophic emergency. So particularly when it comes to, I mean, wastewater and water being two examples of those, but I don't think we need to hire GHD to come up with those policies and procedures. I think we could go to probably even Google municipalities in Florida and Texas, get their policies and procedures, assess them and implement them here.
Yes, that's exactly what I was going to suggest.
Great.
So,
Thank you.
Anything else?
No, that's all for me.
Anything else? Any Walter, you're it. Any questions? Nope. Shaking his head no. Commissioner Gossett?
Just a question, so we'll bring this forward for a vote at the next regular meeting? Is that what I understand, or what is this next
You're
step?
going to have it might be dressed up a little more.
Is that what you'd like?
Yeah, and then certainly, like I said, we really what's built into the policy is, you know, reviewing the entire policy once a year, again, because we base a lot of the figures on the approved fiscal year budgets, but then also the the net position and fund balance at the end of the audit. So, certainly we'll continue to work on researching other municipalities, policies, procedures. I think another important piece is best management practices. And look to hopefully utilize a lot of those policies to make recommendations in the future about how this policy might change. So
was that a yes or a no?
Did we need to vote on this?
We don't.
I don't believe we need to spend more time.
Well, I think if it's a policy that it needs to be adopted by the commission.
Correct.
To have any force of law or any ability to make it move forward.
You'd have to have a vote on it to make it official
Would we
policy.
see the template from Florida or Texas, for instance, that, Mr. Tedder, you're going to provide that before we vote on adopting something?
I think I'd prefer to adopt the policy, and then what we could do is, as we move forward in preparing for the next year, we can bring a lot of those resources back for your consideration as it relates to natural disaster funding in the future. But I think what I heard today is, there's some comfort moving forward at this point. My only concern is we post the agenda this Friday, and so support documents usually go in up to 4 days ahead of the meeting, so it would just be a tight turnaround on some of those materials. But, we could certainly provide some examples and provide them for reference for the time being.
Mayor, if I may, I believe that we've all felt the absence of policies and procedures for the city. This is certainly nothing that is in stone in essence, but it's giving us some direction. It's also giving direction to the other commissioners and future commissioners and city manager of what our thoughts are going forward. There is aspects in here of going above and below the guidelines and what would happen in that period of time, the 60 days for the city manager and department heads to report back to us on how to approach these, either overspending or underspending. I just feel it mandatory that this get in place as quickly as possible. The details, I think we are here and they're existing. Adjustments as we go forward with anything should be made. It calls for here a quarterly review or quarterly update of this information, which I think is imperative. So I see no reason of why this should not be brought to a vote at the next regular meeting.
All right.
Yeah, one other thing. I'm sorry, Mayor, if I could.
Commissioner Thayer?
Yeah, so I know there in the document, it references quarterly reviews, and I'm fine with quarterly reviews, but I feel really strongly we only do an action plan as appropriate once a year. Trying to do them mid-cycle, particularly with timing of payments, particularly around construction projects, can throw things, a lot of variability in it. So I'm concerned that the mayor, not just the mayor and commissioners, but the finance department, Evan, could spend a lot of time developing plans that, aren't necessary. So I'd strongly suggest, yes, if you want to review it quarterly, that's fine. But as far as an action plan, I think that's done once a year during the budget cycle.
I believe it should be done once a year, and I'm not sure we need the quarter. The value of it with our type of economic structure.
Yeah, and I would agree. I don't think we need the quarterly review either, so.
Bunky, did you have something?
No, I just said that we could decide to not have a quarterly review if we didn't.
We'll go to the public. Walter? I'm not,
Walter
tap that,
Brittingham.
see if that's on. Just tap it. There we go. Thank you,
Walter Brittingham, 123 Henlopen Avenue. Good morning. A couple of years ago, I asked Evan Miller how we happened to come upon the new test well out at Healthy Way, and he said it was in the CDP. That's fine, but you come up with a policy today, it'll be in the budget this afternoon. I think an ideal item is like the agenda, or excuse me, like the budget is that for 25 expected or 26 or 27, but to just automatically fund, I gather, that this money is going to be escrowed, that we're not going to spend? Is that what the proposal is of what you're talking about? And not being a smartass, but excuse me, I think at the last meeting that I recall, $5.5 million was going to be set off on the side, and we were going to live on the interest, and we were going to make money. And now it seems to me this year and next fiscal year, and we're eating up the $5.5 million. So if you pass the budget that way, you lied to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Walter. No other members of the public? Okay, we've got the path charted here. Thank you, Adam.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Adam. Thank you, Taylor. And if you could put my screen back up, please. All righty, we're on to our next item of business, which is old business B, discuss new structure of advisory committees. I put two steps in there for consideration today. Update list of desired advisory committees. Do we want to maintain them, sunset them, combine them, or make new? And additional steps after that to facilitate the desired advisory committees and move them forward. I think it's fairly self-explanatory. I'm not going to go over too much of it, but essentially I wanted to remind everybody that, that at the last agenda item report of December 3rd, 2024, articulated a decision to make between going with sunsetting the advisory committees in total and going with a new general single advisory, what is it called, generalist advisory committee. And out of the last meeting, we abandoned that idea to go for new advisory committees. And if you recall at the last meeting, under additional background of my agenda item report today, I listened to the tape again and made a transcript of what I heard, and hopefully it's interpreted correctly. I believe it is, of just trying to articulate what each commissioner provided in terms of committees, the existing advisory committees. By example, I said sunset animal issues, revive when needed, merge trees and green infrastructure, et cetera. And we've got Commissioner Thayer, Commissioner Good, Commissioner Chernowski, and Commissioner Markert and Saunders were present at that meeting, and they enjoyed the conversation, but they really didn't provide any suggestions on committee structure at that time. Perhaps they have now. And then Commissioner Gossett was absent. I think that was during the snowstorm, if I recall. So we'll see if anybody has different perspectives, and also those that haven't made a comment to please offer it. Based on though that the four commissioners that did make comments on the committee structure, I kind of created from that list an environment committee created from merged trees and green infrastructure and environment committees, plus add the sea level rise and climate control, and that would be one combined committee. The second committee would be perhaps titled a public safety committee, created from a merged animal issues, plus a boardwalk and beach, plus a streets and transportation. I'm suggesting today that we look at this next step to facilitate the new advisory committees. And that's first step would be to agree on which advisory committees to sunset, combine, maintain, create new, or and that I'm trying to give a timeline, because I did these steps beyond this so that we will all have an understanding that this is not a quick snap our fingers thing, that, we've got to think about there's steps in there for who is the chair, what's the general initial mission statement. Let's send it to the committee for their feedback on mission statement. What are the rules for membership? Let's review those again, et cetera, et cetera. It's all listed there, but I think the first thing we want to try to accomplish, whether it's today or at the next meeting, is to agree on which are the advisory committees to maintain.
Mayor, you had said you'd correct the record on that one,
I'm gonna let you,
or I could.
you can when the time comes. Let me go to Craig Thier first, and then we'll get to you.
Thank you, Mayor. Just clarification or just confirmation. So what you're proposing based on the previous discussion is starting on line 129 in the agenda item document, right? So based on the above yields, we'd go to 2 committees, environment, I think you're calling one environment committee and the other public safety committee. Am I following you correctly?
And again, that's my interpretation of what was presented by commissioners at the last meeting. Doesn't mean that minds can't be changed or whatever.
Yeah, and I'm fine with that. I'm probably lean more towards going with fewer committees than more committees. And, if over time we decide we need to break something out, we can break something out. But that keeps things nice and concise, tries to accomplish some of the goals, which I understand the previous mayor and commissioners were trying to achieve, reduce meetings, reduce paperwork, reduce staff time, so on and so forth. But again, I mean, if someone, sees that, maybe breaking out a third committee, I may not be opposed to that. So, but I'm certainly fine with what you're proposing.
So far, okay. Suzanne, you wanted to comment. You thought my transcript was inaccurate.
Well, it's not a glaring inaccuracy, but I am in favor of merging trees and green infrastructure with the Environment Committee for multiple reasons. I think that if we finally use some of these tree mitigation funds to plant more trees in the spring and in the autumn, that's the most expedient way to help the environment in Rehoboth Beach in terms of oxygen and everything else. But my issue was that I may have mentioned that the Environment Committee likes to look at these major issues facing humanity, sea level rise and climate control. And I don't have a problem if they want to bring that up, but I felt it was important we not allow the focus of the Environment Committee to be that. Those are federal, possibly state issues. I mean, the magnitude of them is potentially huge. There's a lot of debate about what's going on with sea level rise and climate change. So I'm just concerned. I don't want us to have a lot of have the environment, this new Environment Committee, think that they are supposed to spend a lot of time focusing on how the little 1.2 square mile town of Rehoboth Beach can have a big impact on climate change and sea level rise, because I think that's wishful thinking. That's all. So I just don't want there to be a misunderstanding that I don't have a problem if they bring that up in the context of their other discussions. I just don't want to emphasize it at this point in time.
Thank you, Suzanne. But I think you misinterpret this, that it's not how we are going to impact, not necessarily how we're going to impact sea level rise or how we're going to impact climate control. It's just the opposite. How are they impacting us, I think.
Well, sorry, it says to add sea level rise.
Regardless, they're mentioned here by Commissioner Stronowski. It's mentioned by me. I'm fine with leaving it in just as a placeholder, that if it's there and if the topic comes up, then we know what direction it's handed off to. Is there anybody else?
I had I guess what I'd like to try to understand better is I just feel in the last couple of years of me being chair of the Trees and Green Infrastructure, we've kind of, that group, for whatever reason, somewhat acted, I don't want to say independently, but we were not necessarily engaged heavily with with the commission. And I'm not saying that was a good thing. I think it would be better to be basically assigned certain things in order to support the mayor commissioners. And we had kind of, I would say, advocacy. I use that word, but I mean basically advocating for for the public to understand the value of trees and that kind of thing. But you know, I would perceive that there was some desire that we would be reporting back, or at least requesting that we want to be able to talk about certain things, or these topics that, you know, that the mayor commissioner wants the committee to do, and how that mechanism would work if it were a mechanism. You know, I mean, we traditionally have had certain things that we've done every year, like a public talk, and we've done, you know, things with Arbor Day and some other things and kind of promotional things. But there were some other things that were on our plate, frankly, that didn't really get much activity, simply because it was pushback from the staff, but the staff really didn't have the time or the wherewithal or whatever to do, so that kind of didn't happen. And I didn't know if that was necessarily our role to try to interact with the city staff in order to get those things done or not, without coming back to the mayor and commissioners and saying, hey, listen, we're not getting this, you know what I mean? So I'm really kind of just trying to figure out how are we going to engage, or how are we going to communicate, you know, between the committees and the mayor and commissioners.
Well, there's an outline, I think, in the previous agenda item report that indicates that the committee chairs and the committees have to vet their potential future agenda topics to the commissioners.
Right,
Now,
okay.
you've got a bunch on the tree and green infrastructure, you've got a bunch of ongoing things that would be submitted to us, and we would likely say, keep going on that and finish that.
Right.
But this, I don't think this is meant for any of the committees to totally trash any of their ideas or topics.
Right,
It's
okay.
just a matter of trying to condense it into a smaller group than the green and trees, trees and green infrastructure has how many members on it? Say 6 or 7. And
yeah.
environment at one time had 9. That's 15 people on it.
Yeah, right.
So that would be condensed to whatever number we come up with.
Right.
But my guess is it would be condensed to 7 people.
Right.
And then the mission statement that we would vet and they would vet would combine the functions of what the tree and green infrastructure has been doing, and combine that with the environment. That's
Right.
So I don't see any of the committees totally disappearing. You know,
Right.
boardwalk and beaches would be combined with animal issues and street and transportation. Again, the numbers would, the totality of membership would be reduced quite a bit, but they will all have the potential to be directed to certain topics or something. I mean, that's
Right.
the way I interpret it. Commissioner Saunders?
Mayor, I agree entirely with your configuration of the committees. I would only like to say, would there also still be a liaison situation where one of us would actually sit in on those meetings? Not necessarily as a chairman by any means, but just as a member?
Well, each of these advisory committees have to have a commissioner chair, because that's our,
That would still be going on.
committee rules
Fine,
now.
great. That was my question.
And in part, the reason for that is that the chairs should be the expert in freedom of information. When we had non-commissioners as chairs, we had some problems.
I understand.
And they were resolved by putting chairs in there. So, whenever you say liaison, I keep thinking of the senior center
Right.
or else there. So no, that's a separate entity. And these all need to have chairs. And that's one of our discussions too. That's, I guess, maybe step number 2, where Step number one, agree on which advisory committees to keep. Number two, outline possible content for mission statements. Maybe we use the same mission statements and combine them all together, or we add or subtract. And then number three was appoint chairs for each one. So, did you finish, Bunky?
Yeah, I was only going to just make mention that I have lost a committee member as of this week, so I'm down to 6.
So you're going to need, well, this is a good time to start
Yeah,
replacing.
right.
Because as you read all the steps, at some point, we're going to need to sunset everybody. And then there's a process. You don't just dissolve a committee. You actually have to have a process where they come in, they approve the last set of minutes, they adjourn, they reconvene, and approve a final set of minutes, and then they're dissolved. So there's a certain process there that we would have to follow.
Okay.
And then all these other steps. So again, I put some timing on there that this hopefully starts in February, finalizing the committees and going all the way to into April, May, maybe even June to get these committees back in order.
Mayor, I had.
Commissioner Good?
Yeah, I mean, we're trying to streamline these committees. At least there's a consensus here, we need to streamline these committees. So I don't want to belabor it. However, why with this environment committee, rather than just saying it's a merging of the trees and green infrastructure committee with the environment committee, why, this seems like not the right time to add something to be sort of emphasized in their agenda. No one's against the environment. All of us, want to be better stewards of the environment. I'm just not clear why we're adding more verbiage in this sea level rise and climate control, which is why I was worried when I believe, my position on that is that, they're welcome to bring that up. They certainly, a lot of them feel very strongly about sea level rise, the threat of sea level rise and the risk of climate change. But why are we adding that? But, I certainly, the Public Safety Committee, I like that it's sort of an umbrella title, and we're not adding any more topics to the description. So is anyone else worried that for this Environment Committee, we don't just stick to the 2 committees that are being included under the new, more, broader Environment Committee?
I'm not. Patrick, do you want to offer any thoughts?
Yeah, I am, I'm probably the lone wolf up here in that respect. So I'm not really supportive of this restructuring. I just don't understand. I think where this came from was the frustration of the committee members of bringing suggestions forward and nothing happening, or we rejecting their suggestions and what have you. So to me, that was the base problem, and I don't see this really resolving it. But I certainly do look to citizen input and availability of topics that would be discussed here. So to keep things going forward, I think, what you have, have talked about and suggested here, Mayor, in your agenda report, I'm okay with. I just have a couple questions, and keeping this in mind and going forward with this, which I'm the majority rules here. Looking on your next step to facilitated new advisory committee assemblage, line 141, we talk about outline possible content for mission statements. Sorry.
141.
141, yeah.
Page 16.
Yeah. Outline possible point 2, outline possible content for mission statements. I would hope that in doing that, the current chairs of those committees would first meet and to bring those mission statements together or come up with a separate one. And I would ask that they strongly consider, based on the accomplishments that those committees have done in the past, so that they know what they have done and what they've been successful at, and things that perhaps they have not been successful at. I go back to that favorite subject of ours of dogs on the beach. One committee says yes, one committee says no. So consolidating of this into a committee, I'm not sure how it solves the problem, but I'm just trying to think this through here a little bit. Also then in line 147, you talk about membership. restricted to residents and property owners. I also think we have a very strong voice here in the community of our business owners, and I'm not sure how those voices would be heard on these committees. So some stipulation or recognition of business owners or operators or something of that nature that the committee could reach out to on a certain subject or what have you, but just to be silent on it, I think is not the right way to go. And then jumping down to 169, line 169, is develop list of potential future agenda topics for submittal to the Board of Commissioners. I know you mentioned it later in the document, but I think where we should start is with the CDP and those lists of issues that have been brought forward by the community, by outreach from the Planning Commission and the development of this. I think to go out on other sort of issues that are, I don't like the street light in front of my house because it's too bright, as opposed to issues that have been brought forward in the CDP. And I also think we should also look towards the new strategic agenda or plan when it comes forward. There may be, I don't know, but I think that should be considered of issues to be brought forward to the new committees as they've been developed. I think we're involved in that. Again, that strategic planning exercise has reached out to the community. We had a lot of community input to that, so there may be ideas that should be considered. Again, I don't know, we have not seen a final product, but I think that should be on the table for discussion. And just again, looking back to issues that have been brought forward over the decades, perhaps it would be advisable to have a list of issues that have been brought before the commission over the last 10 years, if you will, that have fallen on their face or have been approved.
By committees.
By the committees, yes. Their sense of accomplishments or frustrations, if you will. I look back to the parking committee that was established, an ad hoc parking committee. They brought forward, after a lot of work, 17 points, and it was basically the condition of the committee recommendation that all 17 of these points needed to be implemented over a period of time. It wasn't snap your fingers and they're all in. But at that point in time, the commission kind of cherry-picked of what went and what didn't have, which resulted in basically the members resigning and dissolving. So again, I think I go back to what are we trying to solve here? And to me, it was the frustrations of the committees of recommending things and they weren't accomplished or they weren't done. So I support going forward this committee structure, but I'm just concerned that we're not solving the problem. So I think this is good and it's a step forward, but setting the expectations for the committees of what we expect and what they expect from us needs to be really upfront.
All right, you've got some notes there that we can address in the future. Anybody else?
Yeah,
Commissioner
Mayor, if I could please.
Thayer?
Yeah, so I really like some of the recommendations that Commissioner Gossett just made. And you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but my understanding is one of the challenges with the members of the committee bringing forth items is FOIA, right? Because these are open public meetings, agendas need to be published, topics need to be published, agendas need to be published. So you can't be bringing up items that are not on the agenda to that meeting. And I think that's at least one of the reasons or one of the challenges in allowing residents to bring items forward. So I do like, kind of for the purpose of getting this moving forward, I really like some of Commissioner Gossett's ideas, particularly around the CDP, which, I've only been here 5 months. We really haven't touched much. And taking that CDP and having the committees work on it, I would, this is a question for Mr. Walton, but I would think that we could have an agenda that says, being really as vague as, hey, we're going to discuss items on the CDP or sections of the CDP, and then they could discuss whatever's in the CDP.
Perfectly
right?
fine,
Yeah.
yes.
So, and then as time goes on, we can figure out a process for how do they bring other items? What is the process for committee members to bring other items to the table, particularly and how do they do that without violating FOIA, right? Because I'll tell you that, in my time on the committee and some of the feedback I got from committee members is Part of the reason they want to be on there is because they want, their ideas to be heard. So I do have some concern that if we say, okay, no, you can't bring any ideas, it's only what we tell you can talk about. I'm concerned that we might have, challenges getting people to want to participate. I may be wrong there, but that's a concern I have. So, thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Members of the public? Walter, anything? On committees? Nope. Shaking his head down. All righty. Okay. Where is my agenda? There.
Walter Birmingham, 123 Henlopen Avenue. For many years, most of you, some of you that have been there, the committee thing has worked not too badly. To get something on a committee list to be able to talk about it, sounds like you're going to be keeping things off. But whether I talk about my 5.5 million and water and sewer, I don't see anything on here about water and sewer.
Water and sewer.
Am I missing something?
I'm not sure what you mean. Budget meeting number 4, which is not this afternoon.
No, water and sewer
has
on
water and sewer.
committees.
Water and sewer.
Kind of miss it. It's a
That-
Shaw
that's-
Park type thing at the end,
Well,
it's not important
I
at
don't think
all.
the commissioners are aware of that. What, there used to
Well,
be a
why
committee.
do we, excuse me, it's a statement. So why do we piecemeal it? So let me change subject a second. About 4 meetings ago, you talk about the new sidewalk standards, 6 or 7 foot. And then we ended up with DelDOT through Adel come in and tear everything up. Have we gone back to DelDOT and asked them who approved the sidewalk rip-ups? Because you folks, have we gone back to DelDOT and asked who designed it? Because we're going to have to pay for the improvements, if anything. And we called GHD maybe or somebody like that in to appraise the sidewalks throughout town. I guess another consultant a different way. But they went around, there was no streetlight committee. It's just changing subjects again. The people in the room that are not here are the people that should be here. And you work to get ready, you paint and everything and get ready for summer. And then you do summer well maintenance. I've talked about this beforehand, but there's no water and sewer committee, and you folks aren't, excuse me, smart enough to say, why are you pulling a well at the Lynch Wells in the middle of the summer when we're selling water to the county and we're selling it in Henlopen Acres and North Shores? And lastly, the artesian, is it Tidewater or whatever, that we're going to supply water to? Are we proposing to have an interconnection to sell water or help? Is it Tidewater or artesian? Which one is it?
Tidewater.
It's Tidewater, but that would be for a redundant feed back to the city, so we would buy water from them, not the other way around.
Okay, and then the question would be, are you aware of, and I know the thing went off, but a couple years ago, the state went out here and did all the work at Healthy Way and ripped out the connection that we had, Sam, had put in to get water from the north. And are you all aware of the fact that is this to take place out at Healthy Way?
Yes.
And we had a T and everything already in the line, and did I see 55,000 or something like that?
Yeah, that would be to connect to the existing infrastructure that's there.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
That would be to connect to the existing infrastructure that is there.
Well, we
The
don't know if
55.
it's still there because the state thought it was a sewage lift station and it was one of our principal wells. And you talk about not having water and sewer committee. And the last thing I've got is grind sidewalks, OSHA, where people are, we've hired people to go out and grind the sidewalks down rather than move the bricks. But most important, they're not obeying by OSHA, and you're forcing people into the streets, and your public works people, and your building and licensing people, and the police should not be forcing people into the street doing something that does not comply with OSHA as far as grinding silica and keeping down the dust. And nobody seems to give a
Thank you.
damn.
Thank you, Walter. We got off subject a little bit. Is there any further comment on committee? I'll write something up for the next meeting, and we'll continue moving this forward. With that, we move on to commissioner announcements and comments. Does anybody have anything? If not,
Yeah, I have.
Commissioner Good?
Unfortunately, I have not yet gathered enough information about the rationale for us selling water, for instance, to North Shores and Henlopen Acres, and now we seem to be in a position that at peak periods, we'll be purchasing water from Tidewater, which on the face of it, it doesn't seem to make a lot of sense.
Suzanne, this is a future topic.
Well, I would like to say that in response to Mr. Brittingham, I think all citizens should, we need to take the time to figure out if, on the one hand, selling water to nearby communities, and at the same time having to contract with a private company, Tidewater, to bail us out. This past July 4th was a problem because Henlopen Acres' own water treatment plant failed briefly over the July 4th weekend. So I think it's something we should put on our radar, and we just need more information. I hope Mr. Tedder and Mr. Matlos will explain why this is a reasonable course of action. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? If not, we'll move on to review future meeting dates. Of course, today at 2 o'clock, we have a budget meeting. Friday, February 21, 9 a.m. budget meeting and a 2 p.m. regular meeting. With that, we come to citizen comment. Walter, I think you already did yours, and you're shaking your head no. With that, I'll adjourn the meeting at 12:18 p.m. Thank you very much.